Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Bakugou is diagnosed with lung cancer? A special shout out to the original creator, bananaboatbussin. Please make sure to show your support by checking out their work from the description. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Katsuki almost isn't surprised. The way his life has been going since the last year of middle school, a small part of him says, yeah, this might as well be happening. The rest of him isn't quite so calm. Getting attacked by the sludge villain, making a fool of himself for all of Japan to see at the sports festival, being actually kidnapped, and failing his provisional license exam might be bad, but this surely takes the cake. The doctor is still talking, but Katsuki stops listening. Besides him, his father's shoulders slightly shake, his mouth pulled into a quivering frown, and his mother's hand grips his. It feels wrong. She should be breathing out a sigh of relief, saying, I knew it was just a long cold, stop worrying us, brat. That should be. Well, he'd probably still be crying, but he'd be smiling and ruffling Katsuki's hair. This isn't how the appointment was meant to go. A few weeks ago, everything was fine. Sure, Katsuki had been sick for a month or two, but it was really nothing serious. Just coughing fits, which he had under control. Then, Aizawa went off meddling in things that did not concern him, blabbing to Katsuki's parents that he'd been sick for weeks and suggesting they take him to the doctor. The next day, Katsuki was called out early from class to essentially cough into gauze and talk about his symptoms. The doctor had assured him it was expected, just to test for strep or similar sickness. Then he was back for a chest x-ray, and no one was telling him why. This time, the doctor seemed more concerned and spoke in hushed words so Katsuki couldn't hear him. Finally, after 2 weeks, a painful biopsy involving someone sticking a whole damn needle into his lungs. Katsuki vaguely remembers crying, his dad's mustache against his forehead, and the doctor's grim face. Now he's here. The doctor has stopped speaking, not that Katsuki absorbed anything beyond the diagnosis. Cancer. Everything moves too fast after that. They discuss treatment, the risks, and how his life will be changed. He isn't spoken to until the doctor asks if he can come every other week for chemotherapy. I have provisional license classes on the weekend and UA the other days. He mutters. The doctor gives a soft smile. Training to be a hero, huh? I can still do that, right? He asks, his voice much smaller and fragile than he intended for it to be. Before him, the doctor sucks in a long breath and is quiet for too long a moment. Katsuki pretends his cheeks aren't wet. Eventually, they're back home, and he's once more sandwiched between his two parents on the couch. His father's eyes are still glassy, and his mother hasn't stopped rubbing his back. On the TV, an all-might cartoon plays, but no one is watching. His mother sighs, then presses a kiss to Katsuki's forehead. I'm gonna go call Aizawa-sensei. I want you to stay home with us tonight. We can drop you off tomorrow for class. She moves to get up, but he reaches out and grabs her hand. Don't let him take me out of training. He half pleads and watches as her eyes flood with tears. Of course, baby. She murmurs, forcing a smile. Katsuki feels numb as he nods and releases her. His father gently pulls him into his chest, and he feels the tears drop onto the top of his head. Slowly, Katsuki wraps his arms around his father's back. He can't remember the last time they hugged like this. After he hit middle school, he began pushing away his parents, but now, the idea of being away from them feels wrong. In the kitchen, he can hear his mother softly talking. "Oi, Hag, bring us some dinner. I'm starving. Pipe down, brat. I'm on the phone." When she returns, there are reheated leftovers in her hand. She makes a joking comment about the cartoon, and Katsuki lets himself relax, surrounded by the warmth of familiarity. Eventually, he's in his bed and entirely alone. He knows he should be sleeping. He must wake up early to drive back to school. But curiosity indeed kills the cat, especially according to the Google results page, blinding him in the room's dark. He wasn't trying to get into his head, but he wanted to know how his life might be going forward. To have some sort of control over how he should be feeling. Mostly, the information matches up with what the doctor said. Except one thing, which is nearly enough to send Katsuki into a panic attack. Glaring up at him from the soft glow of his phone screen, 6.7% taunts him. 6.7% survival rate for 5 years. 10 years is an even smaller, scarier number. In 5 years he's supposed to be an up-and-coming hero. In 10, he's supposed to be the #1 hero. He's supposed to go to school tomorrow and breathe normally, get his provisional license in December, catch up with his peers, and prove he was worthy of All Might's sacrifice. Now, he's not supposed to be anything but the sick kid. Katsuki struggles to keep his sobs quiet, chucking his phone away and burying his face in his pillow. His life is going to change. He's already behind his peers after failing the provisional exam, and now he's probably not going to be able to catch up before the end of the year. The small part of his head from before supplies, if you're still alive by then. He sits up, begging for a distraction. It's weird being here. While his bedroom had become less and less personal as the years went on, from something akin to Deku's dorm to just a place to sleep and study, it's emptier than ever with the few posters and books he had moved to Alliance Heights. The room smells stale and unused. He wonders if his parents will put a shrine here for him. Shuta's still in the teacher's room when the call comes. It's late, the sun has long set, but he had a stack of essays he swore he'd get through before tomorrow. He just finished grading Kaminari's paper, and while the boy has improved, it is still challenging to get through. The call comes as a welcome distraction. Hello. There's nothing but shaky breathing for a second, then a raspy feminine voice. Hello, Aizawa-sensei? He pauses, the voice is familiar, but he can't place it. Yes. May I ask who's calling? There's a swallow as if the speaker is attempting to compose herself. Yes, this is Bakugou Mitsuki. You gave me this number when you came to our home after Katsuki's kidnapping? Shoyuta narrows his eyes. He's never actually had any parents call before. I remember. How can I help you, Bakugou-san? You were the one who spoke to my husband about Katsuki's sickness, yes? We followed up with his doctor about your concerns, and today we got a diagnosis. Shoyuta hums, a feeling of dread forming in his stomach. There's suddenly a choking noise. Katsuki, the sound fades abruptly like she's pulled the phone away to compose herself. He's got a form of lung cancer. Emotions swell in his throat, but he wrestles them back down. I'm sorry, Bakugou-san. There's silence, and the purpose of the call dawns on Shoyuta. You're calling to withdraw him from schooling, I suppose. There's nothing much I can do about that, but I can give the number of dash. No, I can't. Katsuki would kill me if I did that. She chuckles, though it's weak. It's more of the opposite. He told me on the first day, you threatened to expel the weakest kid. Please, Aizawa-sensei, let my son continue school, at least for now. Your classes are his life, and without them, I want him to be happy, for as long as possible. I have the doctor's number, and I thought you could and he could determine the best way for him to continue school and treatment. Shoyuta pauses. He didn't think his stunt on the first day would still be haunting him. Bakugou-san, I assure you that I will expel him just on these grounds. There's a sigh of relief. Thank you, sir. However, I will of course put his health above everything, and if I notice him struggling, I will not hesitate to remove him from classes if I think he can no longer handle it. I thought you could. He listens to you more than me. I know him, and he's gonna want to pretend nothing is different. But things are different, and he won't accept me telling him to slow down and focus on himself. Shoyuta understands. He could already see it, Bakugou throwing himself into training without thinking of the consequences. Your son is strong. I have no doubt he will be able to pull through this. There's a muffled noise that sounds like a sob. Thank you. I just want him to be happy, for as long as possible. She sniffles. The doctor, his number. Shoyuta writes down as she speaks, then repeats it back to her once done. Thank you, Bakugou-san. I will get back to you once I've set up a plan. He hesitates. Your son, is he all right? How is he taking things? He's quiet. He had a breakdown when we were still at the office about not being able to be a hero. She sniffs. I don't think he's fully processed it yet. But when he does, he's going to be angry. Growing up, adults were always fawning over him, so he doesn't quite understand that it's okay to have flaws. It makes sense when Shoyuta thinks about it. His breakdown after the Kamino incident and his failure in the licensing exam was proof of what she was saying. I understand. I assure you, I will do everything I can to help him. Thank you. She sighs. Sorry for disturbing you so late, sensei. Katsuki will be back for classes tomorrow. I'll let you go. Through the speaker, he can hear a muffled yell. Pipe down, brat. I'm on the phone. Mitsuki yells back, and Shoyuta feels a smile tug at his lips. He can see where Bakugou got his personality from. Sorry. The young master needs dinner. Yes, no worries. Thank you for informing me of the situation. Have a nice night, Bakugou-san. There's a click as the call disconnects, and Shoyuta lets out a deep breath. In front of him, coincidentally, sits Bakugou's essay. He doesn't have to grade it to know the boy scored perfectly. His eyes suddenly burn. As a pro-hero, he's long accepted that fate is a cruel mistress, but he didn't expect this kind of cruelty. Dragging a hand down his face, he types the doctor's number into his phone and pressed the call button. Hello. I understand you are Bakugou Katsuki's doctor. This is his UA homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoyuta. The following day, Katsuki changes into the same uniform he wore yesterday, and his father drives him to school. It's drizzling outside, and his father's eyes are wet when they pull up to the school. Katsuki rolls his eyes and punches the old man's arm softly. Stop with the damn waterworks. I'll call you later. He makes to get out of the car, but his father grabs his arm. Katsuki, he looks like he wants to say more but stops himself. I love you. Have a nice day. Katsuki nods and mutters, love you too, before climbing out of the car. The rain feels good on his face, but he knows if he waits any longer, he'll walk in after most of his classmates have arrived. The halls are relatively empty, and he's the first to class. His less bothersome peers arrive first, like Tsuyu and Yororozu, who do nothing more than glance at him. It's when Kirishima comes that things go downhill. The redhead half runs to Katsuki's desk, skidding to a stop before it. Bakubro, are you alright? You left so suddenly for the doctor yesterday, and you never came back home. Pipe down. Katsuki snarls, glancing around to see their classmates looking at them. It's just a fucking cold, alright? I was just dehydrated or whatever. Kirishima stares, brow still creased with concern. But you've gone to the doctor like 10 times this month, only for it to be a cold? Katsuki feels anxious from the sharp gazes around them, watching and sticking their noses into his business. Just fuck off. It's a cold. Leave me alone. Kirishima sighs, looking like he wants to press further, but goes to his seat. From behind him, he hears Uraraka lean over to Deku and whisper about him being a grouch. He shoots her a glare, which she responds to by sticking her tongue out at him. Aizawa enters the room, and things settle down to their typical pace. Katsuki throws himself into today's work, ignoring the itching, burning feeling in his chest. It works until English with present mic, when he can no longer contain the coughs by clearing his throat. The class pretends not to notice, but Katsuki is too busy coughing up a lung to be thankful. After a minute or so, he feels Deku's hand gently patting his back. It helps, not that he'll ever admit it. He asks to go to the bathroom, and Mike agrees, and Katsuki ignores the concerned eyes that follow him out of the room. Once in the bathroom, he splashes water onto his face, then stares into the mirror. The bags under his eyes are more prominent today, and his skin is pale. Sorrow washes over him. How much longer will he be able to even be in school? How much longer until the muscles he spent his whole life maintaining slide away and leave him only skin and bones and sickness? It stings, and he stares harder into the mirror, wishing he could see more than just a pitiful sob story. Bakugou Katsuki, who was attacked by a villain because he was being an idiot, who was kidnapped by villains because of his bad attitude, who failed the provisional license exam because of his own mental frailty, who has cancer and is going to die because life just loves to shit on him. He chokes back a sob and grits his teeth. Heroes don't think like this. Heroes walk into bad situations and return triumphant. He pulls on his usual angry expression and walks out of the bathroom. Aizawa corners him before lunch starts. He jerks his head toward the teacher's lounge, and Katsuki follows. They sit down on couches across from each other, Aizawa's gaze unreadable. They are silent for a long moment, until the teacher releases a long sigh. If I had my way, you'd be banned from training. Katsuki burns a hole in the floor with his gaze. Where did this bastard get off? First snitching and now trying to compromise his entire future. But I know you just do it on your own time, and force Midoriya to keep you up to date. So, I'd like to create a compromise. Katsuki looks at the older man, who looks weary beyond his years. I'm listening. He murmurs and Aizawa continues. Your mother has put me in contact with your doctor, and he agreed to let you continue with both in-class and provisional training on one condition. On days you have chemo, you will not attend physically intensive classes, and on other days, you will communicate truthfully how you feel to me so I can gauge how hard to work you. If I find out you've been lying to me about your condition, I will cut off all training, provisional or not. Katsuki purses his lips. Deep down, he knows it's fair, but on the surface, he feels nothing but anger. I can't afford to get behind the extras any more than I already have, he grits out. Aizawa sucks in a sharp breath. This may sound harsh, but you also cannot afford to succumb to cancer, Bakugou. I know it may seem like I'm inhibiting you from developing like your peers, but Katsuki watches as the teacher licks his lips, face contorting with sudden emotion. I will not let myself watch as you kill yourself. You are my student, and it's my duty to keep you in the best possible health. The words hit like a punch to his gut, and Katsuki feels like he's back at the doctor's, watching the world crumble around him. It's the first time someone other than himself has outwardly mentioned his mortality. His eyes well with tears, and he forces himself to make eye contact with his teacher. I can still be a hero, right? His voice takes on a pleading note, knowing Aizawa would never lie to him. The man before him swallows thickly, but doesn't respond. Katsuki nods, pretending that tears aren't streaming down his face. It's going to be all right, Aizawa eventually murmurs, but Katsuki doesn't fully believe him. It takes 3 embarrassing minutes for him to get his emotions back under wraps. Aizawa looks uncomfortable, and Katsuki forces himself to his feet. Don't go blabbing about any of this to the extras in class. They'll just be all gross and emotional. Aizawa nods and stares at him with his usual strange gaze. Katsuki shows himself out, wiping at his nose and eyes furiously before rejoining his friends for lunch. The rest of the week goes by both too fast and too slow. Katsuki finds himself focusing more of his time on his studies and training, blocking out any possible thoughts on his sickness. It works, almost too well, with nothing different other than Aizawa's questions before training reminding him of certain complications. Which is why he should have expected this. Before provisional classes even start for the weekend, Katsuki is pulled out by Gang Orca, whose eyes are red for a different reason today. Unlike his homeroom teacher, Gang Orca does not stay composed during their meeting. It takes one mention of chemo from Katsuki for the aquatic man to break into tears. Eventually, they decide to adopt the same system Aizawa uses, and Katsuki all but runs away from the teacher to his peers. Todoroki gives him a strange look when he rejoins him. Did he get tired of you calling him a fish finally? Katsuki snorts. Something like that. What's it to you, trying to figure out my weaknesses? Just looking after my friend. Is that so wrong? Despite his blank face, Katsuki can see the mischievous glint in Todoroki's eyes. In lieu of a reply, he elbows his classmate's side. The rest of the class goes well. It's exhilarating to be training, honing his abilities. Each spark of his palms lessens the weight on his shoulders, and there's nothing near as satisfying as blasting through obstacles. It doesn't last nearly long enough. Soon enough, he's back to the dorms, but instead of Aizawa waiting at their bus stop, it's his father. He freezes halfway out of the bus, and Todoroki accidentally bumps into him. Oi, old man, what are you doing here? Do you know this man, Bakugou? Todoroki whispers, clenching the suitcase with his hero costume a little tighter. Yeah, dumbass, it's my dad. Katsuki grumbles back, pulling on a scowl. Katsuki, his father says, smiling softly. I'm here to pick you up for the weekend. Mom misses you. He trudges forward, Todoroki trailing after him awkwardly. Bakugou-san, I'm Todoroki Shudo. I take provisional classes with your son. Katsuki watches him bow and huffs. His father bows in return, smiling. Yes, of course. Katsuki talks about you quite often. The words visibly increase Todoroki's confidence, and Katsuki wants to strangle his father. Oi, Halfie, don't look too pleased. It's only about how I plan to kick your ass to high heaven. The glint from before is back, and a small smile tugs at the other boy's lips. Presumably. Have a nice weekend, Bakugou. He waits till Todoroki is out of earshot to turn to his father. Traitor. The last thing he needs is a big ego. It's just nice to see that you have friends. I was worried after what happened in middle school. Nothing happened in middle school. Katsuki mumbles, walking towards their car. They were always just extras. I knew they never really cared. His father sighs, following behind. Alright. I'm just happy you have people that will have your back. Especially for when you become heroes. They climb into the car and begin the drive home. It's quiet, aside from the soft noise of the news radio channel, until they pull into the driveway of their modern home. Katsuki chews his lip, watching his father turn off the car and begin to unbuckle his seatbelt. So, you think I can still do it? Huh. The older Bakugou pauses, looking up over his glasses. Become a hero. You said you were glad I have friends for when I become a hero. It's almost funny how instantly the air in the car becomes tense. They stare at each other for a long moment in silence, his father's mouth dropping open slightly. Well, he lets out a breath of air in a puff. There's a lot we don't know yet. But I think it's still possible. You're your mother's son. I've never seen you back down before. Katsuki nods, unclipping his seatbelt. Yeah, thanks, Dad. The emotional response is immediate. Dad? The older repeats, lip trembling. Oi, stop crying, old man. And never compare me to that hag ever again. The weekend goes as well as it can. For the first time in a long time, Katsuki and his parents do the cheesy family stuff he usually sees in movies. They play board games from his parents' youth and watch reruns of old hero movies on his dad's VCR. When he finally returns to the dorms on Sunday night, his friends all cheer. Out of the corner of his though, he can see concern in their gazes. The following day restarts the school week. Classes are the same as usual, but by Tuesday night, Katsuki finds himself unable to fall asleep. His first round of chemo starts tomorrow, officially starting the first active change in his life and leaving him addled with worry. Katsuki absolutely hates feeling such weak emotions. Until next Wednesday, he's going to be treated every day. Thankfully, the only day he's going to miss some school is tomorrow, with the other treatments after class/training. Katsuki stares up at his ceiling, seeing phantom shapes in the dark. Deep down he's scared. Not so much of the physical treatment itself, but of what it signifies. The start of the end. He doesn't feel ready to accept that his life is about to be turned upside down. When sleep finally comes, it's fitful. Things move quickly once he wakes. Exhaustion still clings to his mind, and he barely remembers to eat breakfast and drink water before morning classes. He focuses as much as possible until the passing period between math and English. He feigns ignorance as his peers watch him pack up and leave, whispering amongst themselves. Outside, his mother waits for him in her car. It's not too bad during the transfusion. Katsuki's given a magazine to read, and beside him, his mother clacks away on her laptop. The area is quiet aside from the occasional nurse checking on him. Once the treatment's finished, he's given a snack and water and sits for a few minutes of observation. His mother drives him back to school, complaining about all the assholes and idiots she works with, while Katsuki fights off sleep in the passenger side. His original plan was to return for afternoon classes, but by the time he returns to the dorms, he feels woozy and drained, not aided by the fact that he spent the previous night tossing and turning. He flops onto the couch, bones, muscle, and skin weighing him down. Just an hour, he thinks, then he'll go to his own room so the extras will mind their own damn business. When he lays his head on the armrest, he's out like a light. By the time Katsuki blinks his tired eyes open, he realizes it's been far more than an hour. The outside world is dark, and a blanket is covering him up. The second thing he discovers is that he is also no longer alone. At his feet sits Kaminari, gaze intently focused on a video game on his phone. On the other couch, Jairu and Momo both read books, and he can hear soft chatter coming from the direction of the dining table. He wakes. Kaminari announces as Katsuki blinks away the blur in his vision. Someone from the kitchen yells back, and soon enough, Mina is at his side. "My poor sick baby," she coos, pulling the blankets back over his shoulders. "I'm not a baby," he grumbles in return. His head feels stuffed full of cotton. Yeah, whatever, tough guy." She helps him stand, despite his complaints, and leads him to the dining room, where the rest of his classmates and a large bowl of steaming soup sit. "Just eat up, okay?" She presses a kiss to his forehead before skipping back towards the kitchen. Katsuki waits until she's out of eyesight to wipe the kiss away. It seems that his peaceful isolation ended the second he woke up, because Kirishima plops into the seat next to him. "Hey bro. We all missed you today." Katsuki hums, but offers no other response. "Are you feeling alright? I know you told me it was just a cold, and to leave you alone about it, but we're all pretty worried for you." Kirishima stares at him with his stupid big concerned eyes, and Katsuki feels his chest ache. "Please, Bakugou, you're my best friend, and I just want to help. I'll tell you when I'm ready. But right now, all I want to do is eat my damn soup and go to bed." Kirishima barks out a laugh, patting his shoulder. "All right, Grandpa Bakugou. Just don't forget to take out your dentures before bed." Katsuki is pulled into a side hug against his will before finally being able to take a deep sniff of his soup. He smiles a little and readies a spoonful. "Bakugou, we need to have a chat." There's a tense silence. Katsuki looks over to their teacher, who looks unimpressed. With a sigh, he drops the spoon and rises to his feet, ignoring the protest of his legs. He's about to follow Aizawa out of the room when suddenly, Uraraka springs up. "Sensei, please don't punish Bakugou. When we came back from class, he was asleep on the couch and he was all pale and sick. He shouldn't be in trouble for listening to his body." Katsuki watches as the corner of Aizawa's lip pulls up slightly, almost fondly. "It's all right, Uraraka. Bakugou relayed to me his illness. This is just to discuss what he missed in his absence." Uraraka looks a little embarrassed, but she nods and returns to her seat. Aizawa pulls him into the hallway leading to the teacher's dorms, ensuring that they're out of earshot. "How are you feeling?" Katsuki sucks in a breath, already despising that question. "Woozy, I guess. And really tired." He pauses, biting his lip. "Sorry or whatever about missing class. I stayed up kinda late last night, and chemo took more out of me than I thought it would. I'll give you the work you missed before class tomorrow. For tonight, just rest up and recover." Aizawa places a hand on his shoulder, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I would like you to know that your absence in class caused a bit of an uproar. Your peers care for you, even if you pretend not to notice. I think it is in your best interest to inform them of your condition." A small bubble of anger forms in Katsuki's stomach, and he shakes the hand away. "I've already got everyone looking at me all pitifully. Can you imagine how they'll be when they find out that I've got cancer?" "Absolutely not." Aizawa flinches. "Bakugou, they've already assumed the worst. By refusing to tell them, you're only causing more worry. You don't get it?" He snaps. "You don't understand how it feels to have life spit on you at every turn. This is the only thing I can control anymore. I mean, I can't even control my own body anymore." Katsuki feels his eyes burn, and he knows he's being irrational, but he can't help it. "You don't understand how it feels to have your dreams ripped away from you before you even get a chance." He hiccups, rage and misery battling inside him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Bakugou." Aizawa grips him by the shoulders, face firm. "You're right, I don't understand how you're feeling. What you're going through is something most kids your age will never have to deal with. It's scary, being faced with the unknown so young. But you are one of the strongest, most stubborn kids I've had both the pleasure and displeasure of teaching. I don't care how slim the odds may be, you're going to beat this." Katsuki stares at his teacher, chewing his bottom lip. "I want to be a hero still, I want to make it through high school." He confesses, chest shuddering as he sucks in deep breaths. "You will. I promise." The older man's eyes have taken a glassiness to them, and Katsuki feels even worse. A man like Aizawa, crying over someone like him? You're gonna be a hero. You just might have to make some personality changes first. He smirks, albeit sadly. You first. What kind of hero spends the whole day sleeping and scaring children? Katsuki shakes away the hands on him and wipes vigorously at the wetness on his face. I have soup that the extras made me. Are you gonna hold me hostage much longer? Aizawa shakes his head. You're free to leave. Feel better, Bakugou? Katsuki nods. Thanks, or whatever. He turns and heads back towards the student dorms, hoping his eyes and face aren't too red. No one bothers him when he walks in, thankfully, and he returns to his precious bowl of soup and takes the long-awaited sip. It's impossibly bad. Oh my god, which one of you extras made this? Iida stares at the door before him. A sliver of light comes from the crack bottom, indicating that the occupant is still awake. He feels conflicted. He's Bakugou's self-proclaimed best friend, but he's never been the one he relies on. After the kidnapping, Bakugou told more to Midoriya, the person he butts heads with the most out of everyone. And now, with this mystery illness, the blonde has pulled away from him even more. Sucking in a breath, he knocks on the door. There's the sound of footsteps, and the door creaks open slightly. What do you want? Bakugou grumbles, blocking the entrance with his body. Iida smiles. I just want to talk for a little. You've been distant? Bakugou stares at him with narrowed eyes, then steps away from the door to allow him in. Whatever, you have 10 minutes. Then I'm going to bed and kicking your sorry ass out of here. He follows the other in, taking note of a few pill bottles that sit on Bakugou's nightstand. He must not have been subtle in his staring, as they are haphazardly shoved into a drawer. Another stab of worry, but Iida puts it aside and sits on the edge of the bed. He pats the space next to him. Bakugou rolls his eyes, but does take a seat. They sit in silence for a long moment, glancing over at each other, looking away quickly the few times they make eye contact. This is awkward. Get out? Bakugou eventually says, picking at the skin around his nails. The words spur Iida to action. I know we just talked at dinner, and you said you'd talk about it later, but is it later yet? Because I feel like I'm being crushed by this worry, and I just want to know what's going on. You know I would never judge you, bro. Bakugou's gaze stays locked on his nails, but it's obvious by the look on his face that he's mulling something over. You're too damn nosy, sometimes. He murmurs, finally looking up. What do you think is going on? Iida pauses. He's never tried to diagnose him, too scared to Google his friend's symptoms. I guess, I think you're gonna die in a week or something. And that's why you're pushing me away. 1 week, huh? Bakugou laughs raspily. That's a tough timeline. I have a lot to accomplish by Sunday then. Don't make fun of me. I'm just worried and paranoid. You would be too, if you were in my shoes. Iida gently smacks their shoulders together. After tasting Pink Face's healing soup, he punctuates with air quotes. I think I might really be dying. What the hell did she do? Put some of her acid in it. Tasted worse than the protein shakes you make? Hey, my protein shakes taste fine enough. Bakugou snorts. Yeah, whatever. They drift into silence again, shoulders still pressed together. Look, Iida finally speaks. I know that you're afraid of people caring about you. He ignores the immediate denial that comes from Bakugou about not being afraid of shit. But you know you can talk to me, right? I'm never gonna judge you. My best friend. And the same goes for the rest of the squad, alright? We love you, man. So if you ever do feel like telling us what's going on, we'll listen. Bakugou bites his lip, staring intently at everything but Iida. I get that, I guess. Don't know why you guys care so much, but thanks. Tears well immediately in Aida's eyes. Christ, you're as emotional as my dad. All I said was thanks. I'm not saying anything that deep, you idiot. I know, he wipes away the tears and pulls his friend into a side hug. I'm just happy to hear you talk like a normal person. I say thank you all the time, just not you. You never do anything to be thankful for. Bakugou leans into the hug a fraction, which is the best reaction Iida has ever gotten from him. Now go away. I want to be fully rested before our English quiz tomorrow. Iida feels his heart drop into his stomach. We have a quiz tomorrow? Bakugou gives an unimpressed look. Go study, dumbass. If you fail it, I won't eat lunch with you anymore. They part ways, Bakugou crawling into bed as Aizawa pulls out his English book the next room over. Before he does any studying though, he pulls out his phone and opens the squad minus Bakugou group chat. Me, 8:12 p.m. He didn't say anything, but he didn't kick me out immediately. Better than nothing. Cami, 8:12 p.m. TD poor blasty. Mina, 8:13 p.m. Don't worry too much. He'll tell us what's going on when he feels ready, love. Me, 8:13 p.m. He did make fun of your soup some more. Seriously, what happened? I thought you were following a recipe? Mina, 8:13 p.m. I don't know, I tried so hard. Good thing I'll never have to be a housewife. Siro, 8:14 p.m. Bakugou would make an amazing housewife. I can see him now, in a frilly apron, making curry from scratch. The conversation devolved into the fantasy of a domestic Bakugou, and Aizawa set his phone aside. It was time to study. If he wanted to get to the bottom of Bakugou's mystery illness, he would need to spend a lot more time with him, which wouldn't be possible if they were sitting at two different lunch tables. By the following Wednesday, Katsuki is ready to be done with anything related to chemotherapy. Doing it after classes left him even more drained in the evenings, and occasionally he would be too sick to even eat. His classmates gave him worried looks, but he was able to hide it under the guise of extra training to keep up. A week free of transfusions would be just what the doctor ordered. Quite literally. The car drive back to the dorms after his last chemo of the week is pleasant. He relishes in the fact that tomorrow, he'll be able to make a whole feast in his extra time after school. Once he catches up on the homework, that is. His mom plants a big kiss on his forehead when they pull up a block away from his dorms. Good job, baby. I'm proud of you. Katsuki grimaces. Don't W me. I'm your mother, you brat. She gently smacks his shoulder. This weekend, I'll make your favorite spicy miso. Grandma is thinking about coming to visit too. That's another new development, along with the chemo. Katsuki spends all weekend at home, aside from the time he spends at provisional training. It's both nice and awful. The peace that comes from being away from questioning eyes is pleasant, but his parents have been extremely clingy as of late. Not that he can blame them. He's their only child and now they might lose him. I think she may have invited my siblings. We may have a family gathering on our hands. Katsuki wants to roll his eyes, but his mother looks so excited. He knows most of her family lives down south, meaning their meetings are far and few between. Whatever. I gotta go, Ma. I'll see you Saturday. She smiles at him. I love you. Climbing out of the car, Katsuki mumbles the phrase back. His classmates send him soft greetings when he returns. It's only been a week, and they've already figured out that he doesn't like to be disturbed after special training. He flops onto the couch next to Iida with a yawn. Evening, Bakugou. The president says, straightening up. Katsuki only grunts in reply, pulling out his phone to check his messages. His father has sent him a gif of All Might standing up and raising his fist, along with a message that reads, Katsuki is the strongest hero. Congrats on finishing your first chemotherapy round. He quickly turns off his phone before any of his nosy peers can also read the message. After a quick glance around, no one seems to have noticed. Deku walks into the living room, eyes widening upon seeing Katsuki. Oh, Kaken. I didn't know you got home. We made some gyoza, they're in the kitchen if you want to try some. Katsuki feel a rush of nausea at the thought of eating, especially something made by the hands of amateur chefs. Not hungry. A sort of sadness washes over Deku's face, but he forces a smile. Oh, next time, then? Katsuki gives a non-committal hum, a text from his grandmother coming about how excited she is to see her favorite grandson, like he isn't her only grandson. Deku stands still for a moment, before accepting the noise as the only answer he'll receive and returning to the kitchen. As Katsuki types a short but mannerful reply to his grand hag, he feels a pair of eyes on him. Lowering his phone slightly, he sees the serious gaze of Iida. Something I can help you with? Don't think I'm breaking any rules by sitting here. Iida's lips pull into a straight line. Bakugou, as you know, I am class president. Hence, it is my duty to check up on my peers. A cold feeling settles in Katsuki's gut. I understand it must be hard with everything that has happened to you this year, and that you are working overtime to catch up. However, I can no longer sit idly by. Your extra training has been leaving you ill, and you haven't been eating properly for how much you work. The room is deathly quiet, and the classmates that Katsuki can see purposefully avoid looking at him. Anger and embarrassment flood his mind, leaving him red and shaking. Why is it that not one of you assholes can leave me alone, huh? Last I checked, you've never even talked to me except to berate me about following the rules. That is beside the point. I'll have to report you to Aizawa if this dangerous behavior continues. I will not watch you intentionally harm yourself. Iida pushes up his glasses, like he's a hero who's just saved a poor, helpless civilian. Katsuki hates him. Stop pushing some victim narrative on me, alright? The training isn't that hard, I'm just a little sick, still. You've been a little sick for nearly a month. Your body needs time to rest. Katsuki feels the strings inside him snap. How about you mind your own business, huh? You're not my teacher, not my boss, and sure as hell not my dad, so who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Go ahead and report me to Aizawa, see if he does anything. He rises to his feet, shooting a glare at all the people eavesdropping. And that goes for all you useless extras, alright? I'm not dying, so stay out of it. No one speaks, even Iida. Katsuki gives him one more hard look before heading for the stairs. When he gets to his bedroom, the fight has drained out of him. He feels both physically and mentally exhausted. Shame still floods his bloodstream. There's nothing worse than being called weak, especially in front of all his peers. He can take villains, any day, anytime. But embarrassment is a whole other battle. Even once he's in bed, sleep eludes him. The scene just keeps replaying in his head. Maybe he should have just eaten stupid Deku's gyoza. Around 9, there's a knock at his door. Katsuki stiffens, but remains silent. Bakugou, are you asleep? Comes a clipped voice from under the door. Iida. Katsuki rolls his eyes, pulling his blankets tighter around him. I'm not sure if you're asleep, or if you are just ignoring me. I don't blame you if it's the latter. There's a shuffling noise and a deep breath. What I did today was not very presidential of me. Sometimes, I forget that you don't trust me, and that I haven't made much effort to reach out to you. Katsuki sits up. Has Iida lost his mind? What is he trying to say? What you told me today is correct. I shouldn't have confronted you in front of all of our peers and put you on the spot like that, and I shouldn't act like I'm superior to you. I shouldn't act like I've gained your trust when I have done nothing to deserve it. I talked to Aizawa. I know the way I did things was wrong, but I was coming from a place of genuine concern. He told me exactly what you did, that I shouldn't be forcing you to talk to us. Iida sounds somewhat emotional. Serves you right, Katsuki murmurs, rising to his feet and creeping towards the door. I am sorry, Bakugou, and I hope that you will forgive me. What happens in your personal life is not my business, especially when I have never even tried to be friends with you. I am a shoddy president. Katsuki opens the door, and Iida jumps back with a start. Are you done? I'm sorry to have disturbed you. I didn't mean to dash. Shut up. Katsuki rubs his temples. You're right. My life is none of your business. But you're not a shoddy president, or whatever. Iida's eyebrows shoot up. We're still fucking kids. Messing up is part of that shit, right? Katsuki leans against the door frame. Plus, all the other extras rely on you. My opinion doesn't matter much. I suppose I never thought about that. Iida gives him a smile and a stiff bow. Thank you for your words. I will stop bothering and allow you time to rest. Have a good night, Bakugou. Katsuki grunts in acknowledgement, stepping back into his room and closing the door. He feels better, but his body feels heavier with every step he takes. When he collapses into bed, he's out like a light. Katsuki stares into the locker room mirror, his mouth pulled tightly into a grimace. His hero costume shirt is loose around his waist. It's meant to be sung, to really show off the body he's been working on since he was 12. Instead, the black material bags slightly. An outside observer may not notice, but he can't focus on anything else. Kaken, have you lost weight? Deku comments, and Katsuki remembers that he's not alone and that Deku is no outsider. Of course not. It must have just stretched in the wash. He snaps, hastily putting on the rest of his costume. He catches a silent look exchanged between Deku and Todoroki and grits his teeth. Nosy bastards. You wash your costume? What for? Kirishima asks, a laugh in his voice. Katsuki pulls a face. You don't wash your damn costume, shitty hair? Kirishima splutters, as others join in to tease him about his hygiene. Katsuki tunes out, lacing up his boots. The weekend went well. His grandma and aunt had come, and smothered him so much he wanted to run away and never come back. They had cried a lot when they found out, leaving his chest aching with guilt. They asked if he wanted to come down to the coast, if the sea air might help him. He tried to refuse, but they managed to convince his parents to get him to go down for an upcoming long weekend. It wasn't all awful. They made him spicy food to take back to the dorms for his classmates, but Katsuki knows one bite of any of the dishes would kill most of them. They also didn't act like he was already on his deathbed, which he was thankful for. Bakugou! An arm wraps around his shoulders, pulling him out of his thoughts. We are having a karaoke outing on Friday, you wanna come? Katsuki glances at his captor, Shiro, and sucks in a breath. His chemo does resume this Wednesday, meaning he'll have special training for the rest of week. But he's missed 3 different classmate hangouts, and he knows missing another will only lead to more worry. Only if you stop bothering me. He snarls, shrugging away the arm. Shiro grins. I knew you loved us. He bumps their shoulders together and Katsuki feels a small bubble of happiness build in his stomach. He pushes it down and lightly kicks Shiro's shin. Don't let it go to your head, dumb. He barks, then stomps out of the locker room. Training goes? Not the best. Obviously, he still outperforms all the extras in his class, but there's a couple moments where the blood rushes to his head and he has to take a second to breathe. During those times, he can feel the razor-sharp gazes of Aizawa and Deku on him. It's a little intimidating, but Katsuki pushes through before the teacher finds reason to pull him out for the day. Deku, though, is a much harder person to shake. Katsuki knows him better than he even knows himself. The nerd is analyzing every break he takes, and every time his knee quivers slightly on landing. If anyone is going to find out through deductive reasoning, it's gonna be him. Katsuki glares at him for the rest of the day, just to show that he's not the only one who gets to watch. The rest of the week rolls by slowly and painfully. He restarts his chemo, and this time his symptoms are slightly worse. On Thursday, he falls asleep mid-study session and wakes up with the kanji he'd written printed onto his forehead. By the time Friday comes and he's finished his chemo for the day, he wants nothing more than to go to bed and fall asleep. But he walks into the hopeful faces of his classmates, and damn them because he finds that he doesn't want to disappoint them. The night air is cold on his nose as they walk to the train station. There's soft chatter amongst them, but for some reason Katsuki can't seem to focus on anything specifically. Every once in a while he chips in with an insult, though he can't really tell what was being asked of him and instead intently watches his feet to make sure he doesn't stumble. The station is fairly empty, thankfully, and they only have to wait a few minutes for the train to arrive. Once it does, Katsuki makes a beeline for the seats and plops down, not even caring about how many germs he's probably being exposed to. Kirishima sits next to him, lips pursed with worry. Are you sure you're good, man? If you're too tired, I'll walk back to the dorms with you. Katsuki clicks his tongue. I'm fine. I'll just rest my eyes. Kirishima lets out a laugh. Whatever you say, old man. He steers Katsuki's head onto his shoulder. I'll wake you when we get there. Katsuki wants to protest, but he really is tired. Just a minute or two. He murmurs and closes his eyes. The ride is pretty rough. His body forces him awake every couple minutes, and the train rocking makes his stomach churn. When they finally arrive at their stop, Katsuki feels himself sweating from his nausea. He mutters something about having to pee to Kirishima and practically runs to the bathrooms. Usually, Katsuki would never dare use a public bathroom, but his body is already spasming, and he has no choice but crash into a stall and throw up. It only lasts a minute or two, thank God, and he stumbles out to clean up. The sight in the mirror is pretty gnarly. His eye bags look nearly akin to bruises, and he seems paler than usual. He sighs and forces himself to look away. He makes it back to the group before enough time has passed to be suspicious. They tease him a little about being an old man who can't hold his bladder, and in turn he insults them back. They smile and laugh, and Katsuki feels his stomach twist again. The air is even colder now, but Katsuki doesn't mind for once. It stings in a good kind of way, rather than the abrasive cold that makes his bones ache. The karaoke parlor is only a little warmer than the outside world, though the heat of being sandwiched in a crowd of his classmates is enough to keep him from feeling it too much. They're given a huge room, and snacks and drinks start being delivered as soon as they're settled. The smell of cheap food makes Katsuki's stomach clench involuntarily, but he sucks in a deep breath and sits in a faraway corner. Mina and Kaminari pick up mics first, belting out the lyrics of some pop song. A headache forms in Katsuki's temples, the kind that pulses at every disturbance. Around him, his classmates laugh and talk and sing, each hurting more and more. At a certain point, everything becomes fuzzy. The things he hears are still loud, but he can't make out the words, and his classmates' faces become blurred. He slips away halfway through Jairu's solo. She's better than anyone else so far, but it's his only chance to get out without suspicion. Once outside the room, he slumps against the wall. He feels both hot and cold at the same time, and his body is shaking slightly. With a grunt, he lowers himself to the floor and blinks a few times. A worker walks by, giving him a strange look but continues walking. Has he drunk enough? With a start, he realizes he can't remember if he's drunk any water since the ride home from the chemo center. His stomach twists, and it feels like his heart is racing. In the back of his mind, he hears his doctor warning him of dizziness associated with anemia and to treat it by staying nutriated. He needs to call his mom, or someone to come to get him, and take him somewhere dark and quiet. Instead, he closes his eyes, sucks in a deep breath, and passes out. Fumikage knows he's not exactly the most popular student in Class 1A. He's quiet, sticking to the shadows rather than sharing the limelight with his more powerful classmates. So, he's not quite sure how he got invited to karaoke night. He's not exactly buddy-buddy with any of the people who plan the event, but he goes anyway because it seems denying the invitation would be ostracizing. He sticks to the shadows all night, watching his classmates giggle and laugh and sing. It's fun, even if he chooses not to participate. After all, one can't look at Kirishima's smiling face and not feel happy. There's one classmate that doesn't seem to be having nearly as good a time. Bakugou sits in a corner, looking pale and sweaty. He isn't stepping up to sing, like he normally does, instead throwing insults at anyone who tries to partner with him. His behavior has been off all night, as if he's having to force himself to act normal. Fumikage watches as midway through the night, the blonde struggles to his feet and slips out the door without a word, while everyone is captivated by Jairu's performance. A part of him wants to stay where he is, and continue to be surrounded by warm feelings. But the hero side of him is screaming, telling him that something is off and wrong, and to go and investigate. He gives in to the urging and follows Bakugou's suite. The hallway is sparsely lit and so much quieter that Fumikage thinks for a split second that he's gone deaf. A worker walks by, looking anxious, but other than that, it seems to be unoccupied. Then there's a soft grunt, and Fumikage sees the crumbled form of Bakugou on the floor. Fear and adrenaline kick in, and he rushes over to his fallen classmate and crouches next to him. Bakugou? Are you all right? Did someone attack you? He thinks of the worker and immediately rules them in as a suspect. Bakugou opens his eyes slowly, blearily staring up. Just passed out. Fumikage blinks. Passed out? Passed out? Are you still feeling ill? Bakugou struggles to sit back up, and Fumikage gingerly places a hand on his shoulder. No hands swat him away, so he takes the initiative and helps him to a sitting position. Something like that. Do you have your phone on you? Fumikage nods and pulls it out. Do I need to call Aizawa? Bakugou immediately shakes his head no and takes the phone. You can't tell him. He'll get all paranoid and pull me from training. Hesitantly, Fumikage nods again. It's odd that Bakugou would assume something so drastic, but he decides not to question his already guarded peer. He watches as shaky fingers dial a number, then hit call. They sit against the wall, listening to the ringing. There's a click, and then a voicemail plays. Bakugou Mitsuki. Please call me back later if this is a business inquiry. If it's spam, delete my damn number. Fumikage smiles a little. Like mother, like son, he supposes. She never answers unknown numbers. Bakugou sighs, tilting his head back against the wall. Guess I couldn't just walk out of here without a word anyway. It would likely cause suspicion. Fumikage agrees, though telling them the situation would likely soothe their worries. A glare is thrown his way. Are you calling me a coward or something? No. You just seem like the type of person who isn't afraid to tell the truth. What if the truth is something they can't handle? We've dealt with more villain attacks this year than any other class combined. I think we can handle the truth, whatever it may be. Bakugou turns, staring at him with eyes that suddenly hold more maturity than Fumikage has ever seen. I've got cancer. I'm probably going to die before we graduate. Two sets of red eyes stare into one another, both waiting for the other's reaction. You really shouldn't make those jokes. Uraraka would probably pass out too if she heard you saying those things. Fumikage decides it's a bluff, used to trick him into being upset. Something tugs at the corner of Bakugou's lip, like a hint of sadness. Guess so. It's actually iron deficiency? Fumikage raises an eyebrow. You didn't strike me as the anemic type. It also doesn't seem like something to be so defensive about. Its damn bird brain. It's not a personality trait. And those idiots are already so scared of change, think this might be enough to send them over the edge. Many of those who find comfort in the dark are iron deficient. Are you a fellow edgelord? What does anemia have to do with that? Fumikage shrugs. It's just something I have observed. Go away. You can revel in the shadows without me. Very condescending for someone in a skull t-shirt. Bakugou lets out a snort and immediately covers his mouth with his hand. It's rebellious, not emo. Fumikage feels the foreign sensation with a smile on his beak. Are you feeling better? It would be unfortunate if you passed out again. Yeah. I just need another moment away from those extras. You head back in, I'll follow in a sec. As you wish. If you continue to feel badly, I'm sure no one will blink an eye if you say that you're tired. It's 8:30, after all. I'm gonna kill you. Fumikage rises to his feet and heads back to the karaoke room. He can already hear loud laughter and cheering from his peers through the door. Before he goes in, he shoots one last glance at Bakugou. The blonde is still on the floor, but he looks more flushed than when Fumikage found him. I hope you do start feeling better, Bakugou. Everyone has been worried about you being so sick. I thought I told you extras to mind your own business. And I thought you were smart enough to differentiate between pity and genuine concern. Fumikage nods to him one last time. I will let you know if your mother calls back. Bakugou's face takes on a strange look, and he nods back. With that, Fumikage slips back in and allows the noise and familiarity of his peers to distract him from the encounter. A few minutes later, Bakugou slips back in. He glances at Fumikage, but otherwise acts like he was never gone. The rest of the night goes well, until they all shuffle out around 10 p.m. to head back to the dorms. They're pushing curfew, but the only person who seems to care is Iida. Almost everyone falls asleep on the train, and Fumikage mentally assigns himself guard over them. Midoriya and Kirishima seem to have similar ideas, though their eyes look tired. Fumikage notices that Bakugou is among those who have fallen asleep. He's sandwiched between Siro, Kaminari, and Mina, who also snooze. Kirishima sits across from them, red eyes trained on their still forms. He catches Fumikage staring and gives a sheepish grin. It's easy to worry with everything that's happened. And with how sick Bakugou's been, I worry a little more. His voice is soft, but Fumikage watches the brief glance Midoriya gives them. We've been through a lot this year. Paranoia is not uncommon. Kirishima makes a face. Paranoia? You sound like a counselor. Maybe so, but it's true. Does your hypervigilance not stem from the traumatic events we have collectively experienced? I guess so. But I think of it more as a caution. I'm not that tired anyway. They fall back into silence for a few minutes, until Midoriya speaks up. You're worried about Kaken? Kirishima looks up, lips pursed. Of course I am. He's not himself lately. Have you noticed anything in particular? He glances at Bakugou, ensuring the blonde's slumber. I went into his room a few days ago and I saw a bunch of pill bottles. He hid them as soon as I noticed them. All he told me was that he's not dying in a week. Midoriya nods, mumbling unintelligibly under his breath. Fumikage watches, internally debating betraying Bakugou and his moment. He passed out in the hallway. 2 sets of eyes snap to him, both equally worried. He what? Kirishima asks at the same time Midoriya says, tonight? Yes. I observed that he looked ill and left the room halfway through the night. When I followed, I found him on the floor in the hallway and he told me he had passed out due to anemia. Anemia? Kaken never had trouble with that before, though it would require medicine to treat. That doesn't explain his coughing fits though, or his lack of appetite. Midoriya continues thinking aloud, then looks to Fumikage. Did he say anything else? Like anything that could relate to any other illness? An icy feeling settles in Fumicage's gut. He did make a joke. The stares of his 2 classmates is intense, and he realizes that Bakugou was never one for joking around. He remembers the serious gaze, the insistence that their classmates wouldn't be able to handle the truth of his illness. That he had cancer. Katsuki's chemo takes place in the children's ward, much to his chagrin. Everything is brightly colored and the walls are decorated with cartoon animals, which gives him a headache to look at. It also means that the only company aside from his parents are actual children, who stare at him with big confused gazes. It's all just annoying. His dad has brought him today, picking him up after provisional training to take him to his appointment. They sit in relative silence, Katsuki scrolling on his phone while his dad reads some fashion magazines. Occasionally he'll flip it around for Katsuki to see and ask his opinion on a few pieces. It goes fairly smoothly, and Katsuki is taken off transfusion 2 hours later. He feels sluggish, like his limbs weigh too much. The nurse talks to him, but her words fly over his head. The sky is gloomy and dark when they walk out to the car. His dad keeps talking to him, but Katsuki still feels too woozy to pay enough attention. The ride home is uneventful, and a soft rain patters against the windows. It lulls an already tired Katsuki to sleep, head slumped forwards. He wakes up to the feeling of being carried. He wants to struggle against it, but his limbs feel like they weigh 5 times too much, and he can recognize the scent of his father's cologne. As much as he hates to admit it, it's nice to feel like a kid again, with his dad carrying him in from the car after he fell asleep. He's deposited onto the couch with a blanket thrown over top of him. A whiskery kiss is pressed against his forehead, but he's too tired to grouch about it. Instead, he falls back asleep to the sounds of his parents talking in the kitchen. The next time he wakes, he feels much worse. His stomach twists, and he all but throws himself off the couch to rush to the bathroom. The bathroom here far surpasses the public restrooms from the previous night, but Katsuki isn't given enough time to appreciate it before he's on his knees in front of the toilet. Through the gagging, he hears the door open, and a hand gently rubs his back. Eventually, his vomiting ceases and he pulls back to see his mother. She gives him a smile, then passes him a cup of water and dabs at his forehead with a wet washcloth while he drinks. After he sets the cup down and flushes the toilet, she pulls him into her chest. You know, when you were a toddler, you got the worst case of stomach flu I'd ever seen. We were so scared, and we took you to the hospital when it didn't get better. They had you all hooked up these IVs, and you kept crying but there was nothing I could do to help. She cards her fingers through his hair, tears welling up in her eyes. I remember thinking, this is it, I'm gonna lose him, I'm a horrible mother. You must have heard your old hag suffering because the next day, you woke up perfectly fine, and you kept giving me these big smiles. She pulls him closer, and Katsuki can't help but cuddle her back. I told myself that that was the worst that things could get, that every other tantrum, or sickness, or injury would feel easy in comparison. She laughs softly. You certainly tested that theory though, with all the damn fits you would throw. I got it from my mother. He mumbles, and she flicks his forehead. I also gave you your good looks, so don't complain too much. She sighs, nails gently scratching the nape of his neck. There's a pause, like a glass of water just before it overflows. Now, I look back and I see that little grinning baby. When you get better, you smile at me, okay? So I know it's over? Katsuki looks up to see tears falling down his mother's cheeks. While his father crying is a daily occurrence, he's only ever seen her cry at her father's funeral. Tears of his own form, and he pushes closer to her. I'll give you the biggest fucking grin you've ever seen. She nods and gives him one of those sad, watery smiles. Thank you, baby. She kisses his forehead, just as the door creaks open once again. His father looks at them, curled up on the bathroom floor, and Katsuki watches as the tears rush to his eyes and down his face. Katsuki rolls his eyes. Get over here, old man. Soon enough, he's sandwiched between his two parents, a tangle of limbs wrapping him in an embrace. It's warm and safe, and guilt wells in his chest because he's the one who's making both his parents go through with this. Sorry, he rasps out, melting into their arms. It's not your fault, brat, his mother murmurs into his hair. There's nothing to be sorry for, all right? Her voice cracks slightly on the last word, and she lets out a strangled sob. They sit on the tiled floor for long enough that Katsuki's but falls asleep. It's then that he wipes the wetness from his cheeks and clears his throat, shifting in his parents' hold. I'm fucking starving, he says, earning a chuckle from them both. There's a pot of spicy miso on the stove right now with your name on it. His mother supplies, untangling herself and rising to her feet. It might be too spicy for you, though. She smirks slightly, an undeniable challenge being thrown. Huh? You think I can't handle a little spice, old hag? I'll eat more of it than the both of you combined. They eat at the dining room table and it's almost sickeningly normal. His mom complains about work, his dad tries to get her to see things from another point of view. Katsuki tells them he aced another English essay. It's the kind of stuff they talked about before the dorms, and part of him aches with nostalgia for simpler times. Hero school is fun, but he'd be a liar if he said he didn't miss being a kid and not having the public eye watching his every step. When dinner ends, they watch some old action movie Katsuki doesn't pay attention to because Deku is texting him, asking to hang out. They haven't hung out outside of group settings and training in probably years. But here Deku is, asking him to hang out next Sunday. The nasty, arrogant part of him wants to tell Deku to leave him alone, that the nerdy bastard has hidden intentions to humiliate him. The other part, the part that knows there's a cancerous tumor in his lungs that's slowly killing him, wants to accept. He knows what he did to Deku was wrong, and he knows he needs to apologize properly before Deku finds out he's sick and pity accepts his apologies. After all, who's gonna reject a dying kid's apology? He chews on his lips and opens the message. Deku, 8:43 p.m. Hey, Kaken, wanna hang out next Sunday with me? Deku, 8:44 p.m. I know you go to your parents on the weekends though, so no pressure if you don't want to. It's innocent enough. Also, of fucking course Deku uses those dumb kanjis. Me, 8:46 p.m. Request an off-campus visit. Come over at 11. It's immediately read, and the 3 dots pop up as Deku types. Deku, 8:46 p.m. Okay, cool. Omega. See you in class on Monday? Me, 8:47 p.m., obviously. Katsuki closes out of the app, a headache forming in his temples. I'm gonna go to bed. Good night. He mutters, standing up from the couch. So studious, going to bed so early. His mom teases. Don't forget, we have an appointment with the doctor at 10 tomorrow, then chemo afterwards. Ugh, Katsuki groans, shuffling off towards his room. Love you, Brett. Maybe I'll treat you to some ice cream afterwards. She calls after him, voice light with laughter. Good night, Katsuki. If you feel nauseous again, come let us know. His dad chips in. Sure. Katsuki says over his shoulder, then heads upstairs to his room. This section of the house is much quieter. He remembers as a kid, Deku and him would race through these hallways and press their hands and faces against the big front window. The same pang of nostalgia from earlier rings through him. His room is still somewhat barren. He's brought back more clothes here for the weekends, and his desk now has a few office supplies and a lamp for homework, but it's otherwise impersonal. He stands in the doorway, surveying the room, then marches over to the closet. In the very back corner, on the highest shelf, is a plain cardboard box. He pulls it down, coughing at the dust that flutters off. Carefully, he opens it and pulls out a wrinkled poster. It was a limited edition All Might poster celebrating his 20th year as the #1 hero. Katsuki and Deku had waited in line for 2 hours to buy it. Deku still has it. Katsuki's seen it on his dorm room wall in pristine condition. His own is in poor shape. The places where it's folded are worn white, and there's small tears in the corners. A scorch mark mars one of All Might's biceps, the result of him getting a little too excited after they left the store with their prizes. Deku had been so upset to see it, and begged the people in line to let him go back in and get a new one. Katsuki feels the ghost of a smile on his lips. He takes the poster back out to his room and tapes it to the wall next to his bed, where it previously hung before he decided that it was too childish. It's not much, but when he looks around the room now, it feels a little more like home. He heads to the bathroom and brushes his teeth before crawling into bed. It's warm, and he feels the pull to sleep. One last time, he looks up at the poster and smiles again. The next morning comes too fast. It feels like there's barely a moment of time before he says goodbye to his dad and climbs into the car with his mother. The oncologist's office is downtown, sandwiched between 2 office buildings. It looks unthreatening, but Katsuki drags his feet walking in. They only have to wait a few moments for a nurse to call them back to a room, where Katsuki has to change into one of those poorly fitting paper gowns. She asks him a bunch of questions about his symptoms and how he's been feeling after chemo sessions. Then, she massages his throat, pricks his finger to get a blood sample, and makes small notes on a clipboard. He also has to get another MRI, which he despises but grits his way through. When all the tests are done, he's sat back in the cold exam room. He wishes that they would at least allow him to change back into his clothes if they're gonna have the AC so high in the middle of November. The doctor, Nakamura or something, finally makes an appearance, giving his mother and him a big smile and offering pleasantries. Katsuki scowls, crossing his arms over his chest, wishing the bastard would just get on with it. Eventually, he does, sitting on a Raleigh chair and holding a laptop. So, Bakugou, how have you been feeling the past weeks? Anything too concerning? Fine. Just dizzy and nauseous after chemo. Katsuki answers shortly, pointedly ignoring the look his mother gives him. Dr. Nakamura nods, typing something before looking up again. It does seem like your iron levels are pretty low. I'll prescribe some medication for that. He types some more. On other news, it seems that the chemo is doing a good job of slowing things down, but the location of the tumor is worrisome. He turns the laptop to them, revealing Katsuki's MRI. You see this blob here? That's the tumor, and as you can see, it's pretty close to your lymph nodes. Luckily, it seems like the cancer hasn't reached that area yet and hasn't spread outside your lungs. A weight lifts off Katsuki's shoulders, and he sits up a little straighter. So if I keep doing chemo, I'll be fine? There's a pause, and then Dr. Nakamura is giving him a pitiful smile. Well, not exactly. While the chemo is slowing the progression down, the tumor is still growing. I recommend you continue treatment, but cut back on something else. Your quirk, explosion, you've been using it at school, right? Katsuki hesitates, glancing at his mother before looking back at the doctor and nodding in affirmation. Well, I think that the smoke from your quirk is really aiding your tumor's growth. I would go as far as to say that it may be the reason the tumor formed in the first place. The weight falls back down onto him, and this time it's crushing. I have been in contact with your teacher, and I believe it is time to stop quirk training for the time being. Anger floods his blood. No, he spits, and his mother gives him a look, one that tells him to save it for later. He ignores it. No. I'm not gonna give up everything that I've worked so damn hard for. Not now, not ever. Dr. Nakamura's not smiling anymore. I understand that you are training to be a hero, Bakugou-kun, but you're already doing far more than recommended by a person in your condition. Katsuki seethes, a wet anger building in his throat. He wants to sob. He wants to punch Nakamura's smug face. Fuck that, I can handle myself. Katsuki, His mother calls, and he makes the mistake of looking at her and seeing the same teary eyes that he saw last night on the bathroom floor. He looks back to the doctor, anger ebbing into despair. Please. 2 more weeks, okay? Just 2 more, and then I'll quit using my quirk. Dr. Nakamura hesitates, then sighs with a grim look on his face. I suppose 2 weeks is enough to ask for, especially for someone whose life revolves around their quirk. I want you to limit your use during that time, though that means no using outside of training and keeping your explosions as smokeless as you can. Katsuki nods frantically. I'm also going to inform your teacher of our compromise. He seems like the type to keep you in check. He types something into his laptop, then sets it aside and stands up. Otherwise, it seems like you are good to continue chemo as scheduled. If you do start experiencing any other symptoms, like seizures, excessive vomiting, or anything else you think might be wrong, give me a call or head to the ER. It's better safe than sorry. His mother stands as well, grabbing Katsuki's head and making him bow with her to the doctor. Thank you for helping. I apologize for my son's actions today. Katsuki bats her hands today, and Dr. Nakamura chuckles. It's no problem, I assure you. Take it easy, both of you. When they're alone, his mother lets out a sigh and stares at him with a strange look. What? He asks defensively, crossing his arms over his chest. She purses her lips. Your skull is so thick that people 100 years from now will think you're another species. He scoffs, opening his mouth to retort. Well, No, I'm talking and you're gonna listen. She throws his clothes at him and turns her back. I understand that you have that weird superiority-inferiority complex, from people pumping you full of falsehoods as a child. Katsuki redresses, staring at his mother's back. But I can't stand this, she continues. You're not indestructible because you have a strong quirk. You can't just tough out cancer. You gotta know when to put that damn pride away and accept that you're hurting yourself. She turns to look at him, face stony. And I refuse to watch as my son, my only child, kills himself over a fantasy. Katsuki feels the need to snap at her, to yell, but instead he gives her a glare and stalks out to the car. They don't talk during the infusion, or for the remainder of the day once they get home, instead passive-aggressively talking through Katsuki's dad, who looks conflicted over the situation. He keeps trying to get them to just talk to one another, but neither gives in. By the time dinner rolls around, the older Bakugou seems at his wit's end. Will you both please give this up? Tell Katsuki that I'm not talking to him until he acknowledges that his quirk is dangerous for him. Tell Mom that I can't just stop using it, out of the blue. Tell Katsuki that if he'd just tell his damn classmates, this wouldn't be an issue. Tell Mom to mind her own business. It's not her problem. Tell Katsuki Enough. They both flinch back, and Katsuki looks at his dad with wide eyes. He's shaking and his eyes are wet, but it's the first time Katsuki's ever seen him look so angry. Mitsuki, our son is going through a traumatic, painful experience. You can't just expect him to give up the one thing that makes him happy. And Katsuki, your mother isn't detached from this issue. You are our son and we love you, so it's hard for us to see you hurting like this, and especially because your quirk is the thing doing the damage. The table falls into stunned silence, then Katsuki and his mom exchange a look. After a moment, they scooch to his side, cuddling up against him. Sorry, they say in sync, and the older man lets out a breath. I forgive you both. These times are hard on everyone, all right? So save the fighting for once Katsuki is healthy, he sighs, wrapping his arms around them. I love you. My beautiful, strong wife. He kisses her cheek. And my brilliant, talented son. He kisses the top of Katsuki's head. I suppose I was too rough on you, brat. I'm sorry. His mom keeps her eyes downcast. Katsuki nods. Sorry too. I'll take it easier. His father breathes in, pulling them both closer. I'm sorry for losing my temper. I want to have the best experiences we can right now, while we still can. Guilt burns in Katsuki's chest, and he leans further into his father's side. It's all gonna work out. If the universe wanted me to curl up and die, it's got another thing coming. His mother chuckles, reaching over to ruffle his hair. It should have picked someone a little less cocky. The evening goes by fast, Katsuki stealing away to his room to finish up some homework and then turn in for the night. He falls asleep pretty quickly, thanks to the toll the chemo took on him. It only lasts a bit, though, when he wakes up at 1 am to a burning ache in his chest. He sits up, reaching up to grab at his chest. It's a pulsing sort of pain, and an itch creeps up his throat. An attempt to clear his throat only further irritates it, and it devolves into a full-blown coughing fit soon enough. The force of it all makes his sides seize up and down, and he nearly gags on it. His throat is raw, every breath a struggle to take and burns. He grips onto the blankets in his lap with all his might, willing for it to ground him enough that the coughing stops. It proves to be wishful thinking, because the fit continues for far longer than it ever has before. When it does secede, his sides ache and he's certain to be hoarse tomorrow. Embarrassingly, drool has collected on his chin, and he swipes it away before letting his hands fall into his lap. The moonlight streams into his room, casting a halo of light around his bed, and that's how he sees the red streaking up the back of his hand. With a jolt, he clicks on a nearby lamp, further illuminating the clear blood dries on his hand. His first thought is that he accidentally cut himself somehow, but there's no sting of an open wound, rather the taste of iron on his tongue. He throws himself out of bed, walking with wobbly legs to the connected bathroom. The sight of the mirror is as usual, an ever-worsening sight. He looks sicker than he has all month, and worse yet, his lips and chin are smeared with the same blood on his hand. He stares at his reflection for a long time, then with robotic movement, wets a washcloth and cleans his face. Once the stain is removed, he brushes his teeth twice to get rid of the taste, but it sticks in the back of his throat. By the time he crawls back into bed, his exhaustion has hit a peak. He can't remember if his doctor told him this was a symptom or not, but he can't find himself really caring. He shivers, despite being covered in blankets. For the first time since he was diagnosed, he truly feels terminal. Katsuki makes the elective decision to keep last night's discovery to himself. Is it a smart decision? Does he care enough? Also no. It's not like it matters too much anyway. He was just at the doctor, and that Nakamura bastard didn't say anything too bad. Well, other than the quirk thing. Katsuki still hasn't fully wrapped his head around that information. It's hard to believe how fucking cruel it all is. His quirk was a gift, everyone told him so powerful it could level buildings. And now, it's going to destroy its wielder. He thinks of Deku's scarred hands and wrapped arms, the result of his quirk being too dangerous for his body to handle. Katsuki stares down at his own hands, pale and smooth. He's never really been able to scar before, likely due to his mother's side of his quirk. He wonders if his lungs and throat are going to scar, or if his quirk will heal those too. People keep talking to him all morning. His mom chatted his ear off driving him to school, and as soon as he arrived, Kirishima attached himself to his side. Aizawa pulled him out earlier to tell him that if he was caught using his quirk outside of training, he'd be prematurely banned from using it altogether. Now, Kaminari hangs off his shoulders and talks about some nonsense celebrity drama. A headache pounds in his temples, and he has half the mind to explode all the blabbering idiots to kingdom come. Instead, he catches Aizawa staring and smashes the feeling down. The next few days go all right, other than a nearly constant headache. Wednesday's training comes as a welcome distraction. They've got to fight Class 1B or something, which he doesn't hate too much. It's fun fighting different quirks. What's less fun is when he's walking to his group to help strategize, and one of his legs missteps and he stumbles forward into the concrete. Oh, the beast of Class 1A can't even walk properly anymore? Perhaps he's losing his touch. That copycat dude sings. Katsuki didn't care enough to remember his name. It earns him a thump on the head from the big hand girl, though it doesn't quell the frustration building in the blonde's chest. He forces himself to his feet, brushing off his pants. It's his first time wearing his new and improved winter costume, and now everyone's looking at him for the wrong reasons. He wiggles his face further below the high collar and stomps back toward his group. Alright, this is what's gonna happen. The rest of the training goes great. They capture every single one of their opponents and get the flawless victory he had decided they would have. Plus, he'd be lying if he didn't feel lighter than he had all month. People pat him on the back and tell him how great of a job he did. Aizawa even gives him a satisfied nod, which is worth more than any compliment these extras could give him. Later, in the locker room, things are slightly tense. Deku's damn OP quirk has gotten even crazier, and no one knows how to say it. Instead, they strip in silence. That is, until Kirishima opens his big shark mouth. Whoa, Bakugou, you look like you got hit by a bus? Katsuki whips his head down, finding that indeed, his chest and arms were darkened with big, ugly bruises. The hell? He mutters, rubbing a hand over the tender skin. Did you get hit badly out there? It didn't seem like anything really happened, but we weren't supposed to be actually hurting each other. Kaminari pipes in, shirt halfway off. Katsuki looks down at the blotches again. Fucking nothing happened. Guess I just bruised easily. He doesn't have to look to know that Deku is staring at him. Katsuki's fallen out of trees and had nothing happen, so the idea of him spontaneously turning into a banana after some light training is likely concerning. He just wishes that Deku would stop staring and analyzing him. His headache returns, this time with much more passion than before. The rest of the day he spends semi-paying attention, which only serves to make the second tick by even slower. When the final bell of the day rings through the speakers, he all but shoots to his feet. After checking his phone for the time, he mentally calculates that if he gets to the dorm in 5 minutes, he can take a 30-minute nap on the couch before chemo, plus or minus 10 minutes if the extras bother him. God willing, they'll give him space. God proves to be unwilling today. Katsuki grits his teeth as Kirishima keeps talking, clenching the fabric of his pants. He made it to the couch in record time, just to be bombarded with unimaginable amounts of stupidity. Bro, you don't even understand it's like Katsuki's not even fully sure of the topic at hand, but he already feels the need to argue back. God, shitty hair, what are you on about? Kirishima looks up, a crazed look in his eyes. It's similar to how Deku looks when he sees a particularly cool quirk. It's crazy, bro. Fat gum literally bursts through the walls, and the people, it was all, oh my god, my hero. Katsuki stares, hoping that the other will start making sense if he focuses hard enough. Luckily, his phone buzzes at his side, signaling his mother's arrival. Look, as much as I just love hearing this bullshit, I gotta go. Oh, it's okay. I'll tell you more later. Maybe you should do your homework instead. He stands up, ignoring the immediate complaining. His phone buzzes again, and he imagines it's telling him to hurry up. As he pulls on his shoes and places his slippers in their designated cubby, Todoroki appears like a ghost beside him. Bakugou! Christ! He jolts, looking up at his classmate. What? I'm kinda in a hurry here. Todoroki blinks and tilts his head to the side like a dog. Where are you going? You said we could study for the chemistry exam together. When the hell did I say that, huh? At Provisionals. Katsuki racks his mind, and the memory faintly returns. Fine. Figure out which parts you suck at, and I'll help with those when I get back. His phone angrily vibrates twice in a row. Heterochromatic eyes stare at him, though Katsuki can't tell the emotion behind the gaze. Alright, good luck. The interaction leaves Katsuki shuddering with awkwardness, though it's to be expected with Todoroki. Damn bastard. He gets an earful the moment he climbs into the car. The yelling doesn't stop until they reach the transfusion center, and even then it's continued in a far more hushed voice. Just so disrespectful, Katsuki. We barely made it on time. She hisses as the nurse inserts an 4 into his elbow. He winces, squeezing the stress ball he was given a little tighter. We made it, didn't we? Would have had to sit in the lobby if Halfie didn't come bothering me. That's not the point. I just want you to respect my time. I would have stayed at work a little longer if I had known you would be wasting it. Despite the tension, she reaches out to hold his hand once the transfusion begins. He'll never admit it, but the source of comfort is nice. The feeling of the chemicals flooding into him makes his arm ache in a way that is impossible to relieve. What? You would have designed a whole outfit in those extra 5 minutes? Maybe. I'm damn good at my job. She sighs, reaching up to push his hair off his face. Your hair is getting long. So unruly too. She kisses his exposed forehead. Suiting for such a rebellious brat. Oi, back off. He bats her away with his free arm, glancing around to see if any of his child companions noticed. It's a little sad, seeing such young kids in the same position as him. They mostly sleep or sit on iPads with ridiculously large headphones on, and every one of them looks just so sick. Katsuki's chest aches. Maybe, when he becomes a hero, he'll make his main charity shine on. He reminds himself. If he becomes a hero. A weight presses down on his chest, and he pulls out his phone to distract from the rest of the session. When the nurse removes the 4, she notices the bruises on his arm. Bakugou-kun, did something happen? He scowls. Just happened during training. I don't usually get this beat up, though. She nods, brow furrowing slightly. Would you mind if I took a quick blood sample? Whatever. His mother smacks the back of his head. Yes, please. Thank you. The sample is taken via a needle in his forearm. It stings, but it's done quickly enough that Katsuki doesn't really care. He's had much worse, anyway. It takes about 15 minutes for the nurse to return, her face dripping with pity. Sorry, but your platelet levels have dipped drastically since your last test. I'm afraid you're going to need an emergency blood transfusion. The feeling of shame burns in the back of Katsuki's throat. It's not something to truly feel embarrassed about, but nonetheless, he feels guilty. At his side, his mother lets out a sigh. They are moved to a private room, where Katsuki is forced to sit in an even more uncomfortable chair, and an 4 is reapplied. How long will this take? He asks as a new nurse hooks up a bag of blood to his 4 tubing. For you, I'd say about 3 hours. Katsuki nods, thinking of Todoroki's mismatched gaze asking him for tutoring help. At this rate, he'd be home past 9. His mother reaches over to squeeze his shoulder. I'll ask Aizawa if you can stay home with us tonight. It'd be bothersome for you to come in disturbing everyone so late. Katsuki nods again, the feeling of guilt growing in his chest. The transfusion begins, and he pulls out his phone. At the beginning of the year, he had 3 contacts on his phone. His mom, his dad, and Auntie Inko, for emergencies while his parents were traveling. By now, he's gained 20 new contacts for his peers, and they text him so much it's annoying. He opens Todoroki's messages. They talk sparsely and always with proper grammar, which Katsuki appreciates. Me, 6:34 p.m. I'm not going to be home tonight. Ponytail is good at chemistry too. Go ask her for help in my absence. The read notification pops up a few seconds later. 3 dots indicating Todoroki's typing appear, then disappear, replaced instead by the incoming call notification. He sighs, then hits the accept button. Are you alright? Todoroki immediately asks, voice as worried as someone so monotone can be. Their classmates can be slightly heard in the background. Katsuki grunts in affirmation, leaning back in his seat. I'm fine. Just got hurt. I'm going to stay with my parents for the night. He feels his mother's judgmental gaze. There's a brief pause, during which Katsuki hears Kirishima asking about him faintly. I'm going to fail this test without you, Todoroki says, voice softer than before. No, you're not. I did the review like you asked. I really do suck, Bakugou? Ask Ponytail. She's better than me in chemistry anyway. I have fun studying with you, though. We'll study tomorrow. This is my last day of training for the week. They sit in silence for a moment. Why did you call me? Katsuki asks, absent-mindedly playing with a string that sticks out of his shirt. There's a rustling sound, and the background voices fade to nothing, indicating Todoroki has moved to a quieter area. Because I'm not lying when I say you're one of my best friends. I know I'm not yours, but you've been supporting me through all the stuff with my dad. It's only right that I support you back. Katsuki can't help but snort, a warmth taking over the guilt. You might actually fail that exam, 'cause you're acting real stupid right now. He abandons the string, clenching his hand into a fist. I'll kill you if you tell anyone, but we're friends, idiot. He doesn't have to be there to know that Todoroki is doing one of his usual awkward half smiles. Thank you, Katsuki. The warm feeling evaporates. Oi, who said you could use my given name, Icy Hot? You can call me Shuto. I don't want to. Todoroki chuckles. Whatever you say. Are you at your parents' home now? Katsuki lies. You missed out, Kaminari and Jair made us wonderful Korean-style ramen for dinner tonight, and Sada whipped up some angel cake for dessert. His stomach twists at the thought of eating food. Save me some leftovers. I'll judge how wonderful it is when I get back. Yes, chef. Todoroki jokes, and there's a muffled shout on his side. Sorry, Iida is yelling at me for being on my phone at dinner. I'll let you go, I'm sure your parents want you. Katsuki hums. Yeah. Good night. Good night, Katsuki. There's a click as the line disconnects. From his right, his mother nudges his shoulder. Was that Endeavor's kid? Katsuki lets out an aggressive exhale. Oh. It's Shudo. Izuku has always been observant. So much so, his mother thought that it was his quirk with how many details he was able to capture after a brief analysis. His skills have gotten him far enough in hero analysis, but they've aided him elsewhere too. He can analyze fights in seconds, and understand the basics of someone's quirk after only one use. It's also helped him to understand the way his classmates act, and how to get to know them better. It's also helped him figure out that something is going on with Kaken. Not that it would take much work for someone to recognize what's going on with him. Kaken is a powerhouse, raw talent merged with an amazing work ethic. He's not one to half-ass anything, and he'd never willingly slack off. Izuku has watched as, for the first time in his life, Kaken has stumbled. The first changes would be imperceptible to a majority of people, but Izuku is no ordinary person. He has developed a timeline of Kaken's oddities, which he has separated into 3 different periods. First, the symptoms. It starts with the coughing, which comes in short fits periodically, though more often after training. It continued to get progressively worse, up until Kaken missed a few days of school for doctor's visits. Second, new training schedule. Kaken participates in special training every other week, starting on Wednesdays. Said training leaves him tired and without an appetite. Occasionally, nauseous. Unless Kaken has gained Uraraka's quirk, it simply doesn't add up. Third, physically weakened. Special training continues, causing Kaken to lose weight, a feat Izuku thought impossible. His skin also became paler, more sickly during this time. He becomes less agile as well, occasionally stumbling upon landing after flying with his quirk. Karaoke night falls into the 3rd period. Kaken came back from training clearly ill but attended anyway. Izuku tried to keep an eye on him but got too caught up in the activities to pay much attention. However, from what Tokoyami discloses to Kirishima and him on the ride home, halfway through the night, Kaken goes out into the hallway and passes out. He claims it to be anemia but makes a very un-Kaken-like joke about it being cancer. Izuku doesn't know if Kirishima or Tokoyami has connected the dots like he has, but if they did, he hopes they keep it to themselves. A confrontation of Kaken would need to be perfectly planned, so it wouldn't come off as pity, or worse. Izuku doesn't want to toot his own horn, but he's basically got a degree in Kakenology and believes himself to be the prime candidate. So, he plans. He researches the second they get home from karaoke, staying up until the early hours of the morning researching Kaken's symptoms and how they may relate to, well, cancer. It seems drastic to assume, but the more he searches, the more things begin to line up. If he tells Kaken his suspicions and turns out to be wrong, things will go poorly. Izuku can hear it now. You think I've got fucking cancer, 'cause I'm coughing a lot? I'll blow your ass to the moon if you look down on me like that again. The next step of his confront Kaken plan is to get him to hang out one-on-one. A group setting is out of the question. It's much better if Izuku is the only one doing the talking. If Kaken gets mad, it'll be just him who takes the fall, and he's already had Kaken hate him before. It stings a little, but it's better this way. He texts the blonde Saturday night. He half expects for nothing to really happen, just get the notification that it's been read. To his surprise, Kaken responds fairly promptly, and even weirder, invites him over. Izuku can't help the smile that spreads across his face. Todoroki, who sits nearby, raises an eyebrow. Good news? He asks, and Izuku grins. Yeah. Good news? The week can't go by fast enough. Izuku feels embarrassed after joint training. He never did well with attention, and having a second quirk pop out of nowhere isn't exactly bashful. The only thing that distracts him is Kaken, who seems to have taken a turn for the worse. He's seen the blonde fall from trees, get beat up, train until his hands are blistered, and they've never left any kind of bruise or lasting scar. Izuku wishes he were that lucky, with the jagged scars wrapping up his arms. The bruises from training are bad, though. Like getting your ass beat by All Might bad, Izuku would know. He still shudders thinking about final exams. Nothing that happened out on the field should have warranted such bruising, and even Kaken seems surprised by their presence. Then, the blonde never comes home from training, which causes a bit of an uproar. However, he's back in class before anyone else the next day, throwing the usual insults at anyone who tries to talk to him. The rest of the week is fairly normal, with only one other major change. Todoroki calls Kaken by his first name, a feat no one else in the class has gotten. Izuku doesn't count himself. The idea of calling Kaken Katsuki just sounds wrong. Still, Kaken doesn't forcefully tell Todoroki to cut it out, just rolls his eyes every time it happens. Life goes on, until the weekend finally rolls around, bringing with it a heavy chill. Izuku shuffles his feet nervously. It's weird being here. The Bakugou house was a place of many fun memories for Izuku. His mother's apartment is a small 2-bedroom layout, so the castle that is Kaken's home was the primary play-date spot. 3 floors, each with long hallways and big windows that overlooked the entire neighborhood. Izuku felt like he was in a skyscraper each time he went over. He remembers being jealous of Kaken for a while, with his big house and 2 loving parents. Especially after Kaken's quirk developed. It looks almost sad now. It's still impressive, a house of this size always is for Izuku, but there's an aura of sorrow that seems to hang in the air. Izuku shakes off the thoughts and trudges to the door. He knocks a few times, and a few seconds later, Mitsuki opens the door. She looks older than Izuku remembers, though it's mostly due to the semi-prominent bags under her eyes. "Oh, Izuku sweetie. Come in. She ushers him inside, and Izuku feels relief in the warmth of the parlor. "Katsuki! Izuku-kun is here," she shouts, and it's so familiar that Izuku can't help but smile. He remembers the same shouting echoing through the neighborhood when they'd stay out too long. There's a muffled shout in response from Kaken. "He'll be down in a sec. How are you? How's superhero school?" Mitsuki asks, nudging a pair of slippers towards him with her foot. Izuku obliges, slipping off his shoes and into the slippers. "I'm okay. School is fun. There are so many amazing people there. You should rub that attitude off onto Katsuki. All I ever get is extra this, extra that." She grabs Izuku by the arm and pulls him into the kitchen, which smells strongly of cinnamon. "Try this cookie. Your mom gave me the recipe, and I wanted to make them a surprise for Katsuki. He always loved them growing up." A warm cookie is handed to him, and he hesitantly takes a bite. It's good, but not quite his mother's. "It's delicious, Auntie. I'm sure he'll love them. Quit kissing ass, Deku." Kaken barks and Izuku turns to see him emerging from the stairwell. Mitsuki clicks her tongue. "Where the hell did you get that mouth, huh?" Kaken rolls his eyes. "Take a look in the mirror." He steals the cookie from Izuku and takes an aggressive bite. "Aunties are better. Maybe you should leave the cooking to Dad. Ungrateful brat." She pinches his cheek. Izuku feels himself smile again at their dynamic. Maybe things aren't so different from when they were children. "Whatever. Me and Deku are going for a walk. Might not be back for lunch." Kaken pulls away, brushing past both of them towards the door. "Wear a coat, okay? It's cold out." Mitsuki calls after him, then sets her gaze on Izuku. "It was nice seeing you, hun. You're more than welcome to stay for dinner tonight if you'd like." "Thank you, Auntie, but I'm probably going to eat with my mom." "All right." She pulls him into a hug. "Tell your mother to send me the real recipe, damn it." Izuku laughs, hugging her back for a second. "Will do. Maybe more nutmeg?" She hums, pulling back and ruffling his hair. "I'll give it another shot." Then she leans in close and whispers, "Don't let Katsuki push you around, okay? You're strong now, you can put him in his place." "Oh, I would never do that. Kaken and I only fight in training now." "Always the sweetheart. Now shoo, before he gets mad at the both of us." She smiles, but it doesn't quite reach her eyes. Izuku returns to the entryway, where Kaken has already put on his shoes and a thick jacket. "So slow." "Sorry," Izuku mumbles, changing back into his shoes. Where are we going? Wouldn't you like to know? Kaken snaps, calculating red eyes watching Izuku lace up his boots. Frustration builds in Izuku's chest. He'd forgotten how hard it was to have conversations with Kaken when they were alone, without the buffers of their friends or All Might. It stings to think that despite the progress that they've made, things are still stilted and awkward. Izuku barely finished tying up his final shoe before Kaken throws open the doors and stomps out, and he has to do a short jog to catch up. Small snowflakes have begun to fall, giving the air a bit more bite. So, Kaken dash Izuku tries, speeding up his pace so they are walking shoulder to shoulder. Shut up. Kaken interrupts, stuffing his hands in his coat pockets. Don't talk? The frustration aches again, but Izuku forces it down. This is a part of the plan, and pushing Kaken now would result in an early ending to their hangout. So, Izuku sucks in a deep breath and shuts his mouth. The silence gives him ample time to give Kaken another once-over. His cheekbones seem more prominent than usual, and he looks exhausted. Once firmly squared shoulders seem to droop. A shell of his former self, if you will. Kaken catches his staring, but other than a sidelong glance, he doesn't do anything about it. The further they walk, the more Izuku recognizes the path. It's the one to the forest, which he and Kaken used to travel every day in the summers. The trees come into view first, less formidable than Izuku recalls. You remember this place? Kaken asks in a soft voice. It's so odd to hear such a quiet tone for the typically loud blonde, that Izuku hesitates before nodding. Red eyes fixate on him, judging if he's telling the truth or not. I'll race you to the bridge. Izuku can't help the smile that tugs at his face. I'm gonna win. Kaken smirks. Like hell. They both take off, running between trees and jumping over rocks on an imaginary path that they've long since memorized. Kaken's genuinely laughing, a sound Izuku hasn't heard much since they drifted apart. He laughs too, while the cold air and the wind bite at his face. They skid to a stop at the same time, just before the log that connects two sides of the river. They both stand, huffing to catch their breath while surveying the area. It looks nearly identical to how it used to, though the log bears signs of decay. Not as cool as I remember, Kaken says, but his gaze is reminiscent. Izuku hums, inching closer to the edge of the river bank. He sucks in a breath, prepping the speech he memorized a few days earlier. Hey, Kaken dash. He halts in his words. Because when he turns back around, Kaken is on his knees, pressing his forehead into the mud. Izuku, Kaken says, voice slightly muffled from his position. Izuku hasn't seen him in this pose since he accidentally broke his mother's vase, and even then he was fighting against it the entire time. I was wrong. I was dumb, stupid, and wrong. Flushing, Izuku looks around to see if anyone is around. Kaken, you don't have dash. Shut up. I was an idiot, and you didn't deserve the bullshit I put you through. I'm sorry, Izuku. Kaken's voice wavers like he's crying. You're not a Deku. You're a hero, and I was an idiot not to see that. I treated you like I treated you so bad, and I deserve to be punished for my actions. You don't have to accept my apology, but please consider it. Izuku feels his eyes burn. Kaken is tearfully apologizing to him was once his dream, particularly after the kill yourself incident, but he feels no satisfaction currently. Kaken lifts his head slightly to sneak a glance, then immediately returns it to the ground. A dash, well, this was not part of the plan. He was supposed to be the one begging for forgiveness. He needs to just say something, get the topic to how Kaken's feeling, then into his performance dropping in training, and finally, ease very, very lightly towards cancer. Instead, Izuku panics. Kaken, are you dying? He supposes they could just get right into it. Kaken jerks his head up. The dirt has smudged across his forehead and pushed his bangs up slightly. He was crying, Izuku notes, based on the bloodshot and wet state of his eyes. Because I'm apologizing? No. You see, I was really worried about you lately. I mean, you missed classes. So I started keeping track of your symptoms, and Tokoyami said you were passing out in the halls. He sucks in a deep breath to slow his racing heart. He said you were joking about having cancer, and I know you wouldn't say those kinds of jokes, so I researched it more, and now I'm freaked out. What? Slow down. Kaken pushes his torso up, brow tense. Izuku swallows. I googled your symptoms and then… And there was a lot of crossover for someone going through chemotherapy. Kaken stares. I guess I'm worried about you. And I guess cancer's a pretty big jump in the dark, but… And I knew you would never willingly tell anyone, so I figured I should just confront you about it. Fuck. Kaken sighs, pushing himself up to his feet. Are you sure your quirk wasn't analysis? Izuku purses his lips, watching Kaken stuff his hands into his pockets and walk closer. A month ago or something, Aizawa called my parents about me being sick. They made me go to the doctor a bunch. Kaken grabs one of Izuku's hands, pressing it to his chest. They found a tumor right here. My quirk, the smoke caused it. Kaken's breathing is shallow under Izuku's palm. It's odd to think that there's a tumor beneath his fingers. Oh, just like the apology, there's no satisfaction in being right. His eyes burn even more than before, and he can't stop the snot that leaks out of his nose. Yeah. There's a small amount of awkwardness, so Izuku pulls his hand back and stuffs it into his pocket. When you decide if my apology is good enough, don't factor it in. I don't want pity forgiveness. Tears fall in earnest down Izuku's cheeks. The world is cruel. Just as he and Kaken are finally on even ground, the universe decides to take it all away. Well, I don't want your sick apology. Kaken scoffs, but it's clear that moisture has begun to collect in his eyes. It's the only kind of apologies I can give. And I wanted to do it sooner rather than later. What's that supposed to mean? Izuku grabs the front of the other's jacket, ignoring the way his hands are shaking. Kaken stares down his nose at Izuku, his bottom lip trembling almost intangibly. The chemo isn't helping as much as they thought it would. And it's close to my lymph nodes or whatever, so it's probably gonna spread to the rest of my body. No. I won't accept that. We're supposed to be heroes together, remember? We're gonna be the symbols of peace and victory together. We'll save to win dash. I'm not gonna win this, okay? It's already bad. So, that's it? You're not gonna fight. Izuku clenches the fabric tighter, pulling Kaken down slightly. What's there to fight, huh? The doctors? The tumor? I can't blow this problem away. He pulls Izuku's hand off his coat and steps back. Izuku doesn't let the distance between them shrink, stomping closer. You're Bakugou Katsuki, you've never given up on anything before. You're the Kaken who wins, who stands tall after every problem. Kaken grimaces, hands clenching at his sides. I'm not giving up. I'm dying and I fucking deserve it. Izuku stares with wide eyes, green lighting flickering along his knuckles. What? I deserve it. Penitence, for all the bullshit I've put everyone I know through. Tears fall down Kaken's cheeks, but his gaze is still firm and his mouth is twisted with a combination of anger and despair. What bullshit? Izuku asks, grabbing his shoulders. Kaken looks away, sniffling. You know, I destroyed several buildings during the sludge attack. I'm a huge PR nightmare for my parents. I literally got kidnapped because of my villainous attitude. He pauses, glancing back to Izuku before continuing. I put you through hell. I know you haven't forgotten the whole take a swan dive off the roof. Anger courses through Izuku's veins. This isn't punishment for what you did to me. Failing the license exam was more than enough for me. You dying is not a justifiable thing. Shut up. Kaken finally retaliates, shoving Izuku away. If I can't blame this on karma, I can't. It's too unfair otherwise. That makes sense, Izuku thinks, to find any way to explain the unfortunate situation. The past year has stacked its cards against Kaken, now that Izuku stops to think about it. That's because it is unfair. There's nothing that will ever justify this in my eyes, Kaken. Nothing you could ever do to me will make me think you deserve this. Kaken's face twists, and he collapses to his knees. It's too hard to think like that. Izuku crouches down next to him. It's a truly heart-wrenching sight. The person Izuku had seen as the strongest person in existence, small and sobbing on the muddy ground. Without fully thinking it through, Izuku pulls him into a hug. Kaken instantly goes rigid, and Izuku's certain he's going to be taking an explosion to the face before he's suddenly being hugged back. There's a desperate feeling to it, The way Kaken's hands grip at the fabric of his coat like he's afraid Izuku will leave. Tears flood Izuku's vision, and he hiccups before holding Kaken even tighter. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna be heroes together, and we'll keep trading the #1 spot back and forth. They'll call us a wonder duo because we're gonna kick so much ass together, as the symbol of victory and the symbol of hope. Kaken shakes from his sobs. I don't want this to be the thing that beats me, Deku, he whispers, voice raspy and low. And it's not gonna. We'll be old and wrinkled, and decide to go out and fight against the newest big villain despite being retired. We'll win one last time, together. If that sounds nice, Kaken murmurs into Izuku's shoulder. And we'll get statues in a park, just like All Might. Just like All Might, Izuku echoes, sniffling softly. Around them, big, fluffy snowflakes fall, melting the second they reach the ground. It amazes Izuku that something so big can be defeated so easily. Telling Deku has to be one of the things Katsuki regrets most since being diagnosed. The change was immediately noticeable. The Monday after their weird forest talk, Katsuki has a bit of a coughing fit during class. It's rough, but he's able to recover in a fairly short amount of time. Behind him, though, he hears a sniff and turns around to see Deku crying. There's instantly concerned classmates coming to comfort him, and Deku hastily tries and fails to wipe away his tears. Katsuki rolls his eyes, turning back to face the front. He makes eye contact with Aizawa, who raises a singular eyebrow. Katsuki shrugs, and Aizawa slowly nods, before standing up and addressing the class. Midoriya, please step into the hallway with me. Class, focus on your math. The scores on the test last week show that you all need to do some serious work. With that, Deku and him shuffle out of the classroom. The instant the door shuts, chaos erupts. Katsuki does his best to block out all the noise and focus on the worksheet before him, but there's a soft tap on his shoulder. Katsuki, a soft voice from behind calls. Said blonde grits his teeth and looks over his shoulder to Shudo. Midoriya and you hung out this weekend, yes? The class quiets around them. Deku and Katsuki's rough past isn't entirely out there, but almost everyone has assumed that something had happened to make them grow apart. Katsuki lets out a huff. Yeah. We live in the same neighborhood, is that so weird? Shudo tilts his head slightly, looking thoughtful. I was just wondering if you know of anything that could have happened. He wasn't this nearly emotional last week? A lump forms in Katsuki's throat. He can't exactly tell the class what's wrong without spilling his big secret, but at the same time, he knows they'll probably assume the worst. He'd probably do the same in their shoes. I dunno. We just talked about school, and then he went home before my mom could force-feed him spicy food. I suppose I'll talk to him after school, then. Would you like to join me? No. I would rather die than talk to that shitty nerd. But I thought you talked this weekend? That's different. Ugh, leave me alone, we're supposed to be doing our homework. Katsuki turns back to face his desk, a scowl forming. Deku has known for less than 24 hours and is already causing far too many problems. Deku doesn't come back to class, and Aizawa announces that Katsuki needs to stay after class. The gazes of his classmates is nearly overwhelming, whether they are curious or angry. Uraraka looks like she's ready to fight him, whereas Kirishima just looks plain confused. The minutes tick by slowly, and for some reason, anxiety swells in Katsuki's stomach. His brain screams that he's in trouble somehow, that they're gonna kick him from training early because he's spilled the secret to Deku. He feels sick by the time lunch finally rolls around, knee bouncing beneath his desk. Good luck. Kaminari whispers to him, winking before heading out of the classroom. It takes entirely too long for all his peers to vacate the room, though he sort of dreads being trapped in a room with their unreadable teacher. When Iida finally closes the class door, signaling that everyone's left for the cafeteria, the atmosphere instantly turns tense. I don't think you should have told Midoriya. The words hurt, and Katsuki bites his lip. I don't think it's your business, he replies, clenching the fabric of his uniform pants under his desk to keep his palms from smoking. Aizawa sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose. I'm aware. You've made it clear to me that unless I'm in coordination with your doctor, I have no say over your life here at UA. However, as your teacher, I am allowed to share my opinions on your actions. He stands up, jerking his head towards the door. Walk with me. Katsuki reluctantly follows, mouth pulled into a firm line. They walk for a few minutes, until they are far away from any active classrooms. For someone who wants to keep things discreet, you really screwed the pooch by telling Midoriya. He can't lie very well, and he's prone to emotional outbursts. He's also friends with nearly everyone in the class, which further complicates things. He figured it out on his own. I just wanted to apologize to the nerd, but he confronted me about it and I was fed up with lying to people. I didn't think he'd have a mental break every time I clear my damn throat. His words earn him a pointed glare, though it doesn't send a chill down his spine like it used to. Kids these days, the teacher mutters, then shakes his head with a sigh. Bakugou, I understand that this is clearly hard for you. On top of maintaining your physical health, you're having to lie to your classmates on a daily. What's happening with you is quite frankly one of the most tragic things a child your age could possibly experience. Midoriya just isn't mentally capable of bearing such news alone. A lump settles in the back of Katsuki's throat. The reality of his situation feels much worse when Aizawa talks about it. He gave me insight into your weekend excursion. Katsuki pins his gaze to the tile flooring. Looking back, he winces at how emotional he'd become. It's not often he breaks down like that, but somehow, by some stroke of karmic genius, Deku is always there to watch. Aizawa stops suddenly, and Katsuki quite nearly runs into him. Bakugou, what's happening to you isn't your fault. I understand that you and Midoriya have a volatile past, to put things lightly, but that in no way makes up for your current situation. A heavy hand settles on Katsuki's shoulder. His lip twitches involuntarily. But I can't. What am I supposed to do if it's not my fault, huh? There's an awkward pause, and Katsuki feels a stab of guilt for putting his most socially awkward teacher in the position of comforting him. Well, Aizawa finally says eyes steely. You accept that these kinds of things are unexplainable. I won't lie to you and say that you can only focus on the good, or that there's no good finding someone to blame in all this. You're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to be sad, you're allowed to be whatever you want because reality is, this is all unfair. It takes everything in Katsuki to not cry. His head hurts, and his throat feels like it's closing. You're 16. 16. There's no way in hell you could possibly deserve this. If you want someone to blame, that's fine, but you can't blame yourself, alright? Yeah, Katsuki croaks, vision blurring. For the first time since his diagnosis, it's the first time someone has been genuinely mad on Katsuki's behalf. Sure, Deku got plenty pissed, but that was more due to Katsuki's giving up, not the cancer. It feels nice, like finally, someone understands him, understands that treating him like glass isn't the solution to the problem. Thank you, he whispers, and Aizawa gives him a flat, strained smile. No problem, kid. The hand pulls away, leaving a loneliness that Katsuki had forgotten was there. Going forward, I recommend you visit Hound Dog once a week. I'm not going to force you, but it might be helpful to process the changes that are happening. Midoriya is there now. I'm sure he'd be happy to give you the room if need be. Katsuki gives a short nod, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. I'll think about it. No promises, but Bakugus aren't really known to talk things out. The smile becomes much more genuine. I'm sure you've already been the first Bakugou to do many things, especially this year. What's one more thing? He sucks in a breath and checks his watch. Lunch is almost over. You're welcome to take a period to yourself if you'd like. You've nearly got the highest grades in the class. I'm sure a little time off wouldn't hurt too much. Don't wanna. I'm gonna have to miss a bunch later. I'd rather attend while I still can. I understand. Aizawa gives an affirming nod, but his eyes look a little disappointed. Just remember to put yourself first. I don't want you putting school before your health, alright? Katsuki hums, gently tugging at a loose thread on his sleeve. I won't. Trust me a little, old man. The older man shakes his head, smile taking on a bemused aspect. I'm still your teacher, Bakugou. Don't lose what little manners you have. Teeth, don't tell me to skip lessons then. Katsuki huffs, leaning against the wall, a telltale itch at the back of his throat. Now get out of here. It's still my lunch, and I deserve I be free of teacher supervision for it. Fine, fine. See you in literature? Katsuki waits until his tired teacher disappears fully from his view to start coughing. Each one hurts his chest, and it doesn't subside until the bells ring to signify the end of lunch. He pants for a second to catch his breath, then straightens his shoulders and walks back to class as if nothing ever happened. It's a bit bothersome for the next couple of days, avoiding questions from the extras that call themselves his friends. Well, they are his friends, but telling them that would only make things worse for Katsuki. Chemo restarts, and it's almost unbearable sometimes. His lack of an appetite is an ever-growing issue, which has become something people are now actively watching. They leave small dishes outside his door when he skips meals, and in the changing rooms before and after training, he feels like a fish in a room of very concerned sharks. The pity is suffocating. Everywhere he goes, it's, "Come on, eat just a little, I'm worried about you." There are several times when he wants to snap, "No, I'm not fucking starving myself, I'm dying." He always holds back. An eating disorder is probably not far from the real truth. Katsuki had always been a hawk about what he ate and how his body looked, but it's also something that explains all his extra training, skipped meals, and ever-thinning frame. It diverts the questioning gazes, though Iida looks more and more concerned by the day. Katsuki avoids him. The last thing he needs is a repeat of previous events. The pity gets to be too much by the time Friday rolls around, so he starts eating even when he feels like shit after chemo. It usually comes back up, but it's worth it to see the relieved faces of his peers. On Saturday, he wakes up more excited than he's been in a while. His parents are off in Hokkaido for a fashion show, urged there by his own claims of nothing will happen. The provisional event is closed to parents anyway, and there's a party later today for Shudo and him that would make it useless to go home for the weekend. Present Mike, or Yamada-sensei as he keeps telling Katsuki to call him, has to drive him to chemo. It's a little awkward to be in a teacher's car, but his taste in music is good enough to make the rides seem relatively short. "Do you want me to come in with you, listener?" Yamada asks as he pulls into the parking lot outside the treatment center. "No, I can handle it alone." Katsuki's not entirely sure who told all the teachers about his condition, but the sad gazes are enough to make his palms spark. Toshinori has been the worst of all, and Katsuki's caught him more than once giving the blonde devastated looks during training. He's glad the older hasn't tried to talk to him about though. Katsuki can barely survive a talk with Aizawa. A talk from his childhood hero would surely cause a breakdown. There's a nurse in training there today along with the usual nurse, and he misses the vein a few times when inserting the four. Katsuki grits his teeth and the weak, small part of his mind wishes he asked Yamada to come in with him. Otherwise, things go relatively okay, and he's released an hour and a half later. Yamada insists on taking him to ice cream afterward, even though Katsuki's stomach weakly protests. It ends up being alright, but Katsuki's not sure he can ever look his teacher in the eyes again after he falls asleep in the passenger seat and wakes up to the older man taking a selfie with his ice cream cone. He gets in another quick nap once back at the dorms and spends the rest of his time before provisional training making a protein-packed meal to get his energy up for his test. Shudo comes in, and damn, Katsuki must be getting soft because he wordlessly makes the other a plate. The usual bus doesn't show up. Instead, Toshinori drives Shudo and Katsuki to their final provisional day, chatting about strategies, points of weaknesses, and how, if you shouldn't pass, you can always try again. Their training building has been changed to resemble the actual provisional exam, a large terrain, where they are given a different heroic task to complete. They aren't pitted against one another this time, thankfully, so Katsuki, Shudo, and the two from Shiketsu get to work together to complete their tasks. In the end, they all wait around a big TV screen to see if they passed or not. When it shows that both UA students passed, Shudo pulls Katsuki into a sudden hug. "We did it," he whispers, and a lump forms in the back of Katsuki's throat. "Obviously. We're the best," Katsuki mutters, and suddenly, they're both being lifted off the ground. "We succeeded." Inesa bellows, crushing them both in a hug of his own. "Congratulations Todoroki-kun, Bakugou-kun, and Utsushimi-san." From his crushed position, Katsuki can just barely make out, "Call me Shudo." Celebratory selfie. Kami announces, leaning in and taking a picture of them all. "Ah, I'm gonna miss all my boys." Inasa releases Shuto and Katsuki. She's right, I'm going to miss fighting with you both. We should try to get an internship together next time, as failures who finally won. Teach, no way in hell you'd even get into the agencies I'm applying to, Katsuki snarls, and Kami reaches forward to ruffle his hair. We should totes start getting coffee every Saturday since we're already in the routine of hanging out. She chirps. They talk for a moment more, before their chaperones come to collect them. It's then that Toshinori hands them their official provisional hero licenses, a proud smile on his face. I never doubted you two boys. Despite your false start, I can tell that you're both going to do so much good in the future. He looks at them both, his gaze turning slightly sad when he looks at Katsuki. No matter the circumstances, you have proven yourselves worthy of these licenses, and I couldn't be more proud having boys like you represent Yue. Katsuki waits until they're in the car to look at his new license. It's not all that impressive, under the dim light that comes in the windows. His photo is slightly grainy and off-colored, and the text of his hero name is small in order to fit all the words in Great Explosion God Dynamite. It's almost funny to see it, real and in his hand after months of extra work. His eyes suddenly burn. What good is it to him anyway? More likely than not, he'll never even use it anyway. He stuffs it into his pocket, sniffling a little. In his peripheral, he sees Shuto staring, and pointedly looks out the window at the passing scenery. That's how he sees the villain attack, and shouts for Toshinori to pull the car over. It's his last day to use his quirk, and damn if he's gonna let it slip by. There's a party when they get back. Cake, streamers, and cheering. We saw you both on the news, congratulations on your provisional licenses. Iida bellows, giving them a stiff bow. Now, please, enjoy your celebration. Katsuki manages to stay up until 8:30 when the exhaustion of both chemo and provisionals becomes too much. He's eaten a little bit of food, which was surprisingly good compared to his peers' usual cooking talent, and the attention for a positive reason is invigorating. He runs into Deku on his way to bed, who gives him a smile from ear to ear. Congrats, Kaken. I always knew you could do it. Shut it to. I was always able to do it, I just wanted a little bit of extra training to get an edge up on you assholes. Alright, Deku laughs, putting his hands up in mock surrender. I believe you. Good night, Kaken. They part ways, Katsuki heading upstairs to bed and Deku heading downstairs to celebrate. Katsuki barely has time to change and brush his teeth before the events of the day start catching upon him. He's out by the time his head hits the pillow. He always knew he was dying, but it never really felt like it until now. At 1 a.m., he wakes to the potent smell of caramel and his clothes soaked through with sweat. He doesn't have long to ponder why, barely making it to his trash can before heaving up what little he had for supper. It didn't stop there either. He feels both too hot and too cold, leaning against his wall with the trash can cradled in his arms. Nausea churns in his stomach, and his throat feels aflame from the acid. His chest also burns, and when he's not throwing up, coughing fits take over his body. As much as he hates to admit it, Katsuki is scared. He wants his mom to rub his back and tell him things are all right, for his dad to gently massage his head. He wants to no longer be alone. His stomach twists, and hurls again, gagging on the taste of acid on his tongue. It stings, irritating the small cuts in his throat that are the result of his coughing fits. He can't help the tears that blur his vision, too focused on making it into the trash can before him to care. His loneliness is ended in the form of Aizawa 10 minutes later, dressed in lounge clothes and hair messier than usual. Kirishima is behind him, face contorted with discomfort and worry. His hair is ungelled, and his gaze looks panicked, and Katsuki wonders for a second why the hell he's even here, before remembering that the bastard lives in the room directly next to Katsuki, so of course he'd hear. The teacher wastes little time rushing to his side, and Katsuki feels a calloused hand carefully push up his bangs to feel his forehead. A fever, he hears the older man say, though he's not sure who he's supposed to be speaking to. Bakugou, can you hear me? Please nod if you can. Katsuki weakly nods, which makes his vision spin around him. He gags, and retches into his trash can again, squeezing his eyes shut. Have you ever had side effects this bad before? He shakes his head, a shiver raking through his body. Never like this, he mumbles, vaguely feeling tears fall down his cheeks. Aizawa hums. Katsuki feels him move away, and he almost cries out at the lack of comfort. It's short-lived though because he's replaced by someone else. Sensei is gonna call a doctor, okay bro? Kirishima. Katsuki nods again, pressing into the hand between his shoulder blades. However oblivious in school he may be, Kirishima notices and moves closer. It's nice for a second, before nausea ripples through him like a boot in a puddle. He throws up again, which burns even worse than before. You're doing good, let it out, it's gonna be okay, Kirishima whispers, gently patting his back. As if that's not enough, the moment he stops vomiting, he pulled into a coughing fit that further irritates his throat. It's bad, especially in comparison to other fits he's had before. Besides him, Kirishima gasps. Oh god, oh no, he pulls away slightly. Sensei, he's coughing up blood, what do I do? There's a definite panic in his calls, and Katsuki grimaces. There's a lull in the sickness for a moment, which Katsuki intends to take full advantage of. Sorry, quiet down, he mutters, voice raspy. It's normal. Don't lose your shit. He's clearly made the wrong choice in revealing this fact, because when he pries his eyes open, Kirishima's staring at him with a terrified gaze. Normal? He half shouts before sucking a deep breath. Sorry, you don't need me panicking right now. Let's clean you up a little. Katsuki suddenly feels all too aware of the wetness on both his cheeks and chin, and he prays it's not too much of a miserable sight. Kirishima gives him a strained smile, gently wiping away the bile and blood on his face with the sleeve of his nightshirt. You seem like the type to get embarrassed about a stranger seeing you like this. I'm embarrassed by anyone seeing me like this, Katsuki wants to say. Instead, he turns his head back to the trash can and throws up again. The bile burns his throat, mouth, and chest. In a moment of delirium, he wonders if this is how volcanoes feel. It takes a shameful 4 minutes for the nausea to give him a small break. His chest aches for a relief that won't come, and he convulses from the pain of it all. I'm dying, he rasps, unsure if it's sweat or tears on his cheeks. Kirishima makes a noise that Katsuki is too out of it to decipher. It'll pass, bro. Just a little bit longer, the doctor sensei called is gonna help. My mom's gonna kill me. Without thinking, he leans into the redhead beside him. Already putting her through hell, and now, the one time they've gone to a fashion show since the diagnosis, this bullshit happens. Diagnosis, what? Before the question can be answered, the god-awful hacking resumes. Katsuki gasps for air futilely in between coughs, but it's little use as black dots take over his vision. Kirishima says something in a panicked tone, and Aizawa's voice is suddenly much closer than before. Then the world slips away. Reality comes in bits and pieces. He feels himself being carried, though he's not entirely sure by who, just sure of the weightlessness of his body and swaying motion which does little to quell the ache in his stomach. There's a new voice, but Katsuki can't find the energy to determine who it belongs to before passing out again. The next time, he's in a car, pressed between two bodies. There's an icy hand on his forehead, and someone whispering soft words of encouragement. He tries to listen, but everything sounds like it's underwater, and he slips back into the nothingness. The final time is far worse than the previous ones. The world is far too bright, and he struggles against some sort of restraint. There's several people around him, and a tube has lodged itself down his already raw throat. He shivers, despite the sweat that clings to his forehead. A sharp ache pierces through his chest, and he thrashes against the restraints. There's an icy prick in his elbow, and the fight in him melts away. Rest, Bakugou-san. A feminine voice tells him, and because his eyes are suddenly so heavy, he listens. The hospital is not one of Shudo's favorite places. Of course, no one really loves them except maybe doctors, but Shudo prefers to rely on his own experiences in terms of judging things. To him, they tend to be a bit bland, smell constantly of chemicals, and there's an unshakable aura of somberness. There's also the problem with his mother which further taints his attitude towards hospitals, though Shudo doesn't like to think of it much. The current situation also does little to help. Across from Shudo, Aizawa sits ramrod straight, the typical bags under his eyes nearly dark enough to be bruises. His knee twitches every once in a while, and Shudo presumes that he must be stopping a nervous tic to keep his students calm. It's not really working, as next to Shudo, Kirishima is literally falling apart at the seams. Typically gelled hair falls into his eyes, which are red and puffy from crying. Shudo can feel him shaking ever so slightly, his foot tapping at a mile a minute. He's been in such a state since the emergency room doctors pulled Katsuki from Yamada-sensei's car, and Shudo feels for him. He thinks, for a moment, about how exactly he got here. The night was far different from the excitement of the day. Shudo awoke to the sound of retching and hacking from his downstairs neighbor, though it was muffled enough that he just presumed Katsuki was still fighting off the nasty illness he'd been battling the past few weeks. He'd been unable to fall back asleep though, a mixture of the noises his neighbor was making and the excitement at finally catching up with his peers and getting a provisional license, so he decided to head downstairs for a cup of tea to calm himself back down. It's blissfully quiet and soothing, and Shudo was just about to head back upstairs to bed when Yamada burst into the dorm from the teacher's corridors. "Sensei?" Yamada spins to face Shudo so fast it was nearly scary. "Oh, Todoroki. Good morning, listener," he says, then turns on his heel and practically sprints to the stairwell. Shudo stands in confusion until around 5 minutes later, his teacher reappears with several people in tow. Yamada dashes off again, leaving Kirishima in the forefront, red hair plastered to his forehead and eyes wide with panic. Behind him is Aizawa. Shudo has to do a double take because Aizawa's holding Katsuki against his back. His hair and skin glisten with sweat, and his body shakes so violently that Shudo worries for a second that he's having a seizure. Other than the shivers, his body is alarmingly limp in Aizawa's hold. Yamada takes off towards the teacher dorms again, and Aizawa looks at him with a grim face. "Todoroki, go back to bed? What's going on?" Shudo asks, inching closer. Aizawa looks tired and he sighs. "Bakugou is sick. We are going to take him to the ER. His fever is too high, and there are other complications that are worrisome. I can help," Shudo offers. Suppose that would be nice. Yamada is pulling up the car. For now, just try and bring his temperature down. Shudo stepped closer, lowering the temperature of his right hand slightly. The closer he got, the worse Katsuki looked. His skin's ghostly pale, and upon closer examination, there's flecks of blood around the corners of his mouth. "Katsuki," Shudo whispers, sliding his hand against his forehead. Katsuki makes a noise and leans into his it ever so slightly, but otherwise makes no other movement. "I heard him from my room. I should have alerted you earlier. I just presumed it was a part of his illness." There's a honk from outside, and Aizawa sucks in a breath. That's our ride. It takes a moment to get them all squeezed into Yamada's car, with Shudo and Aizawa climbing into the back seat and sandwiching Katsuki between them. Kirishima sits in the front, though he turns around to hold one of Katsuki's limp, sweaty hands. Shudo focuses so much of his attention on lowering the blonde's body temperature, he almost misses when tired red eyes peel open. He groans, grimacing. "Katsuki," Shudo calls, but the other's eyes don't contain any recognition. "Katsuki, can you hear me?" Katsuki experiences a violent shiver, and his head lolls back. "Not feeling good," he murmurs, then his eyes slip back into his head. Shudo tries to ignore the aching in his chest at seeing his friend so different. He's seen Katsuki cry, seen him through tantrums, seen him panic at the idea of losing, but he's never seen him so fragile. His eyes suddenly burn and he sniffles. "Pull through, Katsuki," he whispers and recools his hand. The second they arrive at the hospital, Aizawa pulls Katsuki out of the car and disappears into the emergency room entrance. Yamada watches for a second, brow furrowed, then sighs. "You boys go on in. I won't make you sit in the dorms." It all brings him back to the current moment, with Kirishima on the edge of panicking and Aizawa in a very similar state. It's almost too quiet, and Shudo clears his throat. Two sets of eyes snap to him, and he schools his expressions. "Katsuki's illness. It's not just a cold, is it?" Aizawa lets out a sharp breath, mouth pursed. "There are things you both deserve to know, but I won't take that experience away from him. Once he wakes up and is lucid, I recommend you both try to speak with him." Kirishima's head snaps up, jaw clenched. Like the diagnosis stuff he was muttering about? Or the 10,000 bottles of pills on his bedside table? Or the passing out in hallways? Kirishima dash, Aizawa tries, brow furrowing. No. I'm supposed to be his best friend, and now it feels like I barely even know him. Hell, I can't even use his first name, but Todoroki can? How the hell did that even happen? Kirishima pants, tears falling down his cheeks. Why doesn't he trust me enough to tell me, huh? His voice cracks slightly, and he buries his head in his hands. Kirishima, take a breath. I understand how you're feeling and that you're upset, but this anger is going to do nothing to help Bakugou right now. But it's just not fair. Kirishima's shoulders slump and he takes a few deep breaths. I just want to be there, you know? Aizawa gives him a flat smile. And you are. God knows what could have happened had you not come and got me. You're a very good friend to him. Kirishima nods and his foot tapping lessens. Shudo bites his lips, feeling another wave of guilt. Was he the one who kept Kirishima and Katsuki from connecting? With a quick breath in and out, he stands up and turns to the redhead. Do you want to go get a coffee with me? Huh. Kirishima looks up, confusion clear on his face. The vending machines are right over there. I'm thirsty and you look like you might need a walk. He stares, then slowly stands next to Shudo. If they come, don't go back without us? Aizawa nods, and Shudo watches his shoulders droop as soon as they begin walking away. The vending machines aren't too far from the waiting area, just enough that they're out of sight of their teacher. Shudo pays for 3 coffees, and they stand in silence for a moment, watching the arm of the machine collect their drinks. So, Kirishima says, shifting a little awkwardly. I'm sorry for what I said. It's not very manly to get jealous of you, especially since Baku's allowed to have friends aside from me. It was stupid of me to be upset. Shudo nods slowly, formulating his sentences in his mind. I also apologize. If I'm being honest, I only started calling him by his given name because I thought it would bug him. I'm sure if you talk to him, he'd be more than happy to let you use it too. Nah, it's not even like I really want to. I've been calling him by his last name for so long that I think using his given name would be kinda weird. It's just, I want to be close to him. Feels like this past month, ever since he got sick, he's been pulling away, and I don't know how to help. Their coffees clunk into the deposit area, but neither of them moves to grab them. If it makes you feel better, he hasn't told me anything either. Though, I'm pretty sure that Izuku knows something. We used to talk about the things we found worrisome, but now he changes the topic every time I bring it up. Plus, he's a horrible liar. That dude's got a hawk eye on everything going on. There's no way Baku would willingly tell him though. He must have figured out what was going on and confronted him. Their moms are friends, maybe he found out that way? Shudo purses his lips. Or he connected the dots on his own. Either way, we'll find out soon enough. Kirishima shuffles his feet. To be honest, before tonight, I thought he might have an eating disorder. I thought he was a vampire. PFT what? Shudo shrugs. He barely ate food around us, and when he did it looked like he was forcing himself. Plus, he's recently become much paler, and I always thought his canine teeth were rather sharp. For the first time all night, Kirishima laughs. I could see it actually. He'd make a devilishly good vampire. With his red eyes and cruel demeanor, he smiles, looking over to Shudo, then spoke in a much softer tone. Maybe he ate some bad blood, and that's why he kept coughing it up? Shudo goes for a comforting smile, but he's never been good at them and he's sure that it just looks like his face is twisted up. It's going to be okay. He's Bakugou Katsuki, he'd never let something like this beat him. He stoops down and collects their coffees, passing one to Kirishima, who takes it with a mumbled thank you. He's not going to be very happy when he wakes up, Kirishima says as they begin to walk back. 1,000 yen he's going to yell at us? I think he's going to be bashful. He hates when people see him being weak. When they return to the waiting room, Aizawa looks a little worse for wear. Sensei, Shudo calls and holds out the coffee. It's been a long night. Thankfully, Endeavor has bought us some caffeine to tide us over. Aizawa's lip quirks up ever so slightly, and he takes the drink. Give him my thanks. Shudo nods and returns to his seat next to Kirishima. They sit in far more comfortable silence, drinking their coffees. Shudo feels himself nearly nodding off despite the caffeine when the doors to the ER rooms open. Are you all here for Bakugou Katsuki? Waking up has got to be in Katsuki's top 10 worst moments montage. The first thing he feels is pain, a dull throb in his throat and chest, and the all-too-familiar sting of being on 4. He opens his eyes, only to see a nurse quietly sneaking around the room. Bakugou-san, she whispers, offering a friendly smile. I apologize, your companions and you were all sleeping, so I was trying to be quiet. If you'd like, I can give you the rundown once they wake up. The second thing is the realization that there are 3 people sitting in the chairs around his bed, which fills him with a sense of dread like none other. Kirishima and Shudo both rest their heads against the foot of his mattress, and it would be almost endearing if it didn't mean they both had to see him in such a sorry state the night before. Further away, leaned up against the wall, Aizawa sleeps. The lack of his parents makes his chest throb, and he swallows down the ache. Katsuki shrugs and the nurse nods. Please hit the call button if you need anything, we'll be back around 9 to give you another physical. Please excuse me, she gives him a quick bow, then leaves the room. Outside the privacy curtain, he can hear whispered voices and conversations. He surveys his area, noting the handheld phone and tissue box on his bedside tray. Gingerly, he reaches over and picks up the telephone, quietly pressing in his father's cell number. It rings for only a moment, then there's a static click as the line connects. Hello? His father's voice asks, and Katsuki immediately picks up on the panicked undertones. Dad? There's a grainy-sounding gasp, then his father speaks to someone in quick, whispered words. You're awake, huh? Katsuki hums, leaning back into his pillows. Yeah. I woke up a few minutes ago and, where are you guys? Well, we're still in Hokkaido right now. There was a villain attack on the coast, and now all flights out are cancelled until they catch the guys who did it. I really want to be there with you. His father's voice takes on a choked-up note, and it takes everything in Katsuki to not roll his eyes. Tisi, I'm fine, old man. I got my teacher and a couple of extras here to watch over me. Katsuki fiddles with the edge of his blanket, licking his lips. I'm gonna be fine. Katsuki, his father whispers, sniffling slightly. We got a call in the middle of the night that you've been put in the ER for coughing up blood. That's not fine. We were worried sick. Your mom just fell asleep for the first time since we got the call. Guilt swirls in his gut, and maybe it's the pain medication, but suddenly Katsuki feels like crying. I'm sorry, he whispers back, leaning his head back to look at the ceiling and keep the tears at bay. No, don't be sorry, kid. I just wish we could be there to hold your hand with this. What friends are there? Todoroki and Kirishima. His father hums. Oh good, they seem like really good boys. Do they know what's going on? No. I was planning on telling them, but things kept getting in the way. They'll probably be pretty confused then. It might, be the perfect time to do it. Katsuki sighs. Yeah, whatever. I'll do it when they wake up. Good. They deserve to know. I think the kids at your school like you more than you know it. There's a muffled voice on the other end, and his father sighs. Sorry, Katsuki. We have to turn in our luggage for extra screening. Please call me again later, okay? And keep me updated on how things are going? Fine. I'll take notes on whatever the doctor comes in saying. Let me know if the flight shit changes, but I'll be fine if you don't make it out in time. Try not to worry so much. His father chuckles a little. I'm your dad, I'm gonna worry no matter what you tell me to do. I love you. Love you too, Dad. Now go do whatever you need to do. Alright, bye-bye, kid. Call you later. The line clicks and Katsuki sighs. He peels his head off the pillows, only to make direct eye contact with Kirishima. He jolts a little, then lets out a huff. Oi, why are you watching me, huh? Kirishima looks at him strangely, and Katsuki notices the drool stuck to the corners of his cheeks. Are you feeling okay? Yeah, fine. Katsuki replies, pursing his lip. It feels awkward, and while he can't remember everything that happened last night, the parts he can recall are extraordinarily embarrassing. You drooled on my bed, shitty hair. The strange look morphs into a mix of frustration, anger, and sadness. Stop lying to me. I know that something's going on and that Midoriya knows about it, but I still don't. So for once in your life, please, please, tell me the truth. Okay? Katsuki sighs, letting his shoulders deflate. It's nothing against you, alright? You're still my best friend, it's just not something I think you can handle. I only told Deku because he fucking sleuthed it out like some weird detective. Bakugou, come on man. I'm worried sick about you, and yet you sit here, claiming that it's better if I don't know, or some bullshit. It's not. I'm losing my mind, most of the damn squad is losing their minds. I get that your whole thing is being emotionally repressed, but I can't take much more. They stare at each other for a long moment, a sort of test of wills to see who will look away or blink first. Katsuki loses, pulling his gaze to his lap. I'm sick. Like, I've got a disease. Kirishima blinks, lashes already clumping with moisture. Oh. Like a disease? Got it? Katsuki purses his lips, looking back up at his weepy friend. A tumor in my lung disease. A tumor that's cancerous? Oh, Kirishima breathes out, nodding his head slowly as his gaze fixates on the end of the bed instead of Katsuki. Varium, sucky. It's lung cancer. Not exactly jumping for joy. Not fun. Katsuki feels his heart fold in half as Kirishima's shoulders jump with a suppressed sob. Thanks for telling me, I mean it had to be hard for you, it's really rough, but… Wow, lung cancer though. Katsuki purses his lips. Steady yourself. Stop pretending to be chill, alright? You can have a meltdown. Kirishima looks back up, sharp teeth gnawing into his bottom lip. Oh Bakugou, I gotta go. He watches as Kirishima stumbles to his feet and all but flies out through the privacy curtain. Seconds later, there is a loud slam of a door, and Katsuki flops back into the pillows. Fuck me, he murmurs, resting his face in his hands. His record for pleasant cancer reveals is currently a -2. With Deku, it was pure emotions, anger, fighting, crying. With Kirishima, it just felt awful. Lung cancer makes sense. Much more than vampirism. Katsuki nearly jumps out of bed at the voice, dry and quiet at the end of his bed. Jesus Christ. I'm gonna kill you. He grits out, pulling his hands away from his face to glare at Shudo, who still rests his head on the bed, but with his eyes open and staring. Was I supposed to not hear the conversation between two of the loudest students happening 2 feet away from me? Shudo asks, lifting a hand to rub at his eyes. You could've, I don't know, acted like you were awake instead of pretending to be asleep during a personal conversation? I thought it might be easier this way. You'd only have to explain things once, and I'd have time to process things while you finished the conversation. He finally sits up, letting out a sigh. It didn't work, but at least you get to save your breath now. Katsuki furrows his brow, crossing his arms across his chest. What didn't work? The processing thing. Shudo replies, and if Katsuki looks closely he can see the slight quiver in the other boy's hands and the moisture collecting in his eyes. Shit, he mutters under his breath, pinching his brow. I'm sorry, okay? I'm really trying to get better at this whole reveal thing, but it really sucks because people keep confronting me first. Shudo sniffs a little but reaches out to hold onto one of Katsuki's feet through the blanket. It's a little weird, but he chalks it up to Shudo's social ineptitude. I'm not sure there's a great way to tell people. It's just really sad. I'm not actually any good at this either, so I suppose we both have that in common. People like us need our Dekus and shitty hairs. I suppose so. Shudo manages a weak smile, giving his foot a small pat. It takes most of Katsuki's will to not kick the bastard away and yell at him to learn more social skills. Katsuki, I know that our relationship is mostly about being rivals and teasing each other, but it also means a lot to me. Under all the spiky walls you put up, you're a decent person sometimes. What kind of compliment is that, huh? Shudo purses his lips. I didn't mean it like that. 1 second. He sucks in a deep breath and closes his eyes. You act tough and you don't let just anyone get close. I know that I'm not exactly your shoulder to cry on, or vice versa, but you're still one of my best friends. To know that you're in pain is uncomfortable. He reopens his eyes, And Katsuki sees more emotions there than he's seen Shudo express all year. I want to yell at you for not saying anything sooner. I want to cry because it's unfair. I want to hug you. I want to do something. Katsuki leans forward, pulling the hand on his foot into his own. Then yell. Cry. Do whatever you want. Shudo sits still for a second, staring, then shakes his head. Katsuki, you have cancer. The burden of my emotions is not one I am going to let you deal with right now. Yes, I'm angry with you and devastated that you have to deal with it, but that's something that I won't let you deal with. Your energy is better spent elsewhere. The words shouldn't lift a weight Katsuki didn't know he was carrying, but they do. Shudo has just freed him of emotional responsibility, and suddenly he feels a little like crying. You can yell. Literally, everyone else has. Yelling at you would accomplish nothing. I will process whatever I feel away from you. As a friend, your decision to reveal your sickness shouldn't be based on how I might react. It should be based only on how much you trust me. Oh. Katsuki slowly nods, and Shudo squeezes his hand. Though, I suppose I did find out outside of your decision. Maybe you should be yelling at me. Katsuki huffs, using his free hand to flick Shudo's forehead. Believe it or not, I'm not really in the mood to yell. Shudo smiles and opens his mouth to say something, but a new voice beats him to the punch. Could have fooled me. They turn their heads to see Aizawa staring at them with bloodshot eyes. I know this might be the first time you've been in a public hospital ward, but typically people try to keep it down before 10 in the morning. Shudo's shoulders droop, but Katsuki just clicks his tongue. I had to deal with some shit. Like my parents' whole thing, Kirishima confronting me for no damn reason then running away, and this idiot eavesdropping. Sorry you thought that everyone would be taking this situation well. I suppose I should have expected less. Did your parents tell you about the situation? That villain thing? Yeah. I told them not to stress about it. I got you so it's fine. Aizawa looks a little flustered for a moment, then schools his expression back to an exhausted neutral. I'll do my best in their place. Have you called the nurse over yet? A wave of sudden nerves washes over Katsuki, and he pushes it to the part of his mind where emotions he doesn't want to deal with go. Oh. I feel fine, so we should really just check out and go back to the dorms? Not a chance. Aizawa replies coolly, pressing the call button. Shudo's hand gently heats, and he gives Katsuki a small smile. It's going to be okay, he says softly, and Katsuki groans. The nurse is prompt, thankfully. She performs a quick physical exam, asks some basic questions on how he's feeling, then types shit into a laptop in silence. Shudo still won't let go of his hand, and Katsuki begins to suspect that it's more for his own sake than Katsuki's. Finally, the nurse finishes up and gives a tight-lipped smile. Dr. Nakamura has been informed of your situation and he requests we take an MRI. After that, it's not fair. Aizawa echoes, one hand coming up to gently cradle the back of Katsuki's head. Katsuki gaps for air in between sobs, burrowing his face into his teacher's shoulder. I want my parents, he murmurs, and Aizawa hums. I know, kid, but I'm the best you've got right now, so we gotta work together for now. That means no more yelling at doctors, pulling out IVs, or trying to attack people. Can you do that? Katsuki nods, sniffling. I guess. Good, Aizawa whispers and repositions them so they both sit on the bed. They stay there for a while until Katsuki's eyes burn from crying and Aizawa's shoulders must be sore. Katsuki pulls away, rubbing futility at his eyes before looking around the room. I think icy hot and shitty hair are gone for good. Aizawa snorts. They'll turn up. They're heroes in training. If they can't navigate a hospital, I'll dock their grades. Katsuki knows that it really means that Aizawa isn't going to leave him alone. Not that he blames him. Katsuki was seconds away from ripping a needle from his body in rage. I'm gonna take a nap. Wake me up if they show. I gotta talk to Kirishima without him running away. Copy, Aizawa says, returning to his visitor chair, but pulling it closer to the bedside than before. Sensei thinks, I'm sorry I said shitty things. A small smile tugs at the teacher's lips, and he nods in understanding. Didn't take it personally, kid. Now get some rest. Katsuki gives a strained smile of his own, then settles back into the pillows. You're kinda like a spare dad. I was lying before. Is that so? Yeah. Most of the extras talk about it all the time. So thanks for being my replacement dad today. Aizawa doesn't respond, but when Katsuki glances over he's smiling a little bit more. Anytime, kid. He finally says, voice slightly choked up. Katsuki hums and closes his eyes. Don't let it go to your head. With that, he turns on his side and lets the fatigue of both the night before, the emotional swings, and chemo wash over him. Then, just before he drifts off for good, he feels a hand gently pat his head. Katsuki wakes up 3 hours later to voices. He peels open his eyes, noting the absence of the 4 in his arm. Next to him, Shudo is curled up in a seat and scrolling through something on his phone. A quick glance around shows that this is his only companion, and Shudo looks up with a strained smile. His eyes are a little puffy and red, but it seems that whatever crying he did was not super recent. You slept a lot. Will you be able to maintain your 8:30 bedtime? He teases, and Katsuki reaches out an arm to flick his forehead. Shudo chuckles, then returns to typing something on his phone. Am I wrong? Katsuki clicks his tongue, then awkward shuffles into a sitting position. Where is everyone? Last I checked, there's supposed to be 3 of you losers. Well, Aizawa is just outside the curtain with some doctor and, well, I did what you asked with Kirishima, but he called his mom to come and pick him up instead of coming back here. It shouldn't sting as much as it does. Katsuki bites his lip and nods, forcing himself to maintain the angry, uncaring facade. Makes sense. I'm surprised you're still here. Don't you have homework or something? Shudo narrows his eyes for a second, then slouches back into his chair. I talked to Sensei about some events that happened in my absence and decided it was best to remain here to show you my support. Katsuki grimaces. It's embarrassing enough to have a meltdown in front of your teacher, but even worse for a classmate to hear about it through them. I'm fine now. Just got emotional or whatever. A gentle hand settles on Katsuki's shoulder. It's all right. I would have reacted similarly if I were in your shoes. Your super loaded, deadbeat dad would probably get you shipped out to America or something for better care. Shudo smiles a little. He probably would want to, but I would rather stay here and be with my friends if it was. If it happened to me. If it was this bad goes unsaid but still understood, and Katsuki shoots for a smile of his own. I want to stay here too. And I want to stay in school until they physically rip me out of there. No use in staying holed up in some room like this for a couple more weeks of life, when I could be out in the world with a shorter timeline. You shouldn't act like it's a sure thing. I mean, Midoriya presented with a quirk when he was 14, miracles happen. Katsuki chews his lip, eyes stinging. While Shudo means well, the irony of his fallacy is still there because, unlike Deku, Katsuki doesn't have All Might or some other miracle worker. Yeah, I guess. Just trying not to get my hopes up when the odds are pretty against me. The hand suddenly tightens. The odds have always been against you. You spent 15 minutes with a villain that should have killed you in 2. You won the sports festival even after everyone was booing you for giving your opponent a fair fight. You were kidnapped by the worst organized crime league in Japan and still escaped them. You spent weeks working hard to redeem yourself after failing one of the biggest exams in our high school careers. You have very bad luck, but that's never stopped you before, has it? Each word hits like a punch in the gut, and Katsuki slowly nods. Yeah. Fuck, yeah, I do have some pretty shit luck sometimes. Then I know that you'll beat this too. Unless it's too challenging, of course. Shudo's tone takes on a teasing note. Katsuki scoffs, and even if his mood is poor, he appreciates the attempt at cheering him up. As if, I'm the strongest there is. Obviously. Shudo withdraws his hand and then frowns slightly. I have some bad news though. The class chat, I'm not sure if you're still in it, is talking about our absences. Apparently, Jair was also awoken last night and overheard some of the conversation. Everyone's asking about what's happened, and Midoriya has privately messaged me about 40 times. A sort of dread tugs at Katsuki's stomach, and he grimaces. So much for subtlety, then. I don't have my phone, can I use yours? Wordlessly, Shudo hands it over. He was correct. Katsuki had long since muted the chat after 5 attempts at leaving wound up nowhere. At first, it seems to be the usual jokes and memes. More recently though, Deku sent a text asking if anyone knew about Shudo's whereabouts. Soon after, Mina asked about Katsuki and Kirishima, and after a few minutes of panic talk of contacting Aizawa about missing students, Jaira fessed up to hearing them in the early hours talking about going to the hospital. From there on, it seems the panic got worse and turned into a chaotic mess. Katsuki groans, a stress headache steadily worsening behind his eyes. Is it okay if I use it to call Deku? I'm surprised he hasn't tracked us down and showed up here himself. Nerd's probably about to burst a blood vessel. Shudo nods. Would you like me to step out? I understand that Midoriya has already had a rather rough time about all this. It's tempting to say no, but Shudo's got a point about Deku taking Katsuki's diagnosis fairly hard. Yeah. Just come back in like 10 minutes? You're not the worst at keeping me company. A smile tugs at Shudo's face, but he visibly tries to hide it. I'll be back in 10 to hold your hand again. I could do with a coffee anyway. Katsuki waits until Shudo disappears through the privacy curtain to dial Deku, who picks up nearly immediately. Todoroki-kun. Are you okay? Or is Kaken hurt? Oh, or Kirishima? Katsuki pulls to phone back slightly, wincing. Oi, Deku, quiet down. He half shouts. The line instantly silences. Are you with the class right now? There's a pause, during which Katsuki hears someone whisper a quiet, what's going on? Everyone's in the common area right now. We were waiting on one of you to update us on what's happening. Present Mike came in and told us to leave it alone, but we were just really worried about you guys, and Dash? Deku, Katsuki says, shutting down the rambling. Find someplace private? Deku hums and he must pull the phone away because his voice becomes distant. Kaken needs to speak to me alone. I'll be back in a sec. It's followed by rustling and after a minute or so, he speaks up again. I'm in my room now, but everyone's really concerned. What's going on? Katsuki sucks in a breath. Last night, I wasn't feeling good cause of the chemo or whatever, and it bothered the tumor or something and I had to go to the hospital. Kirishima found me, and Todoroki was helping my fever, so they both ended up coming with. Silence echoes back, and Katsuki takes it as an encouragement to continue. Todoroki and Aizawa are still here, but Kirishima went home because it was too overwhelming. I should be getting discharged this afternoon, though. There's a sniffle, and Katsuki nearly feels relieved at finally getting a predictable reaction out of someone. But, are you feeling okay? Is everything alright? Katsuki hesitates, but the idea of leaving Deku out of the know makes him feel too guilty. It's getting worse. He whispers. The intake of breath on the other side of the line is so sharp that Katsuki flinches. It's followed by a moment of quiet, then a wet sniff. Oh, Kaken, Deku breaths. It's so pitiful that Katsuki's eyes mist up. Deku, please just keep the extras off me for the rest of today. I'm gonna tell everyone tomorrow, but I told Todoroki and Kirishima and it went really shit, so I want to save any more bad reactions for another day. Yeah, I'll tell them that. You were sick and you need some space but you'll explain tomorrow. Deku stops taking, and they sit in awkward silence for a moment. Are, your parents there? Oh. They went to Hokkaido for a show and are stuck there. I heard there was an attack. Are they okay? Katsuki nods, then remember that Deku can't see. They're fine, security just won't let them leave until the guy is caught. Another pause. Kaken, I'm really sorry. You shouldn't have to be alone. I'm that uncle and auntie are probably anxious to get back to you. It's whatever, Katsuki murmurs, chewing on the inside of his lip. I got a couple of losers here anyway to help. It's not all that bad. Still. I know we still aren't exactly the best of friends, but you can call me any time that things get too much to bear. Katsuki clicks his tongue. Says the guy who melted down every time that even cleared my throat. He hesitates, then lets out a heavy breath. Thank you for offering, though. He mumbles out, voice lowered. Deke makes a noise that sounds entirely too happy. And no problem, Kaken. I hope you feel better soon. God, shut up. I'm hanging up on you. Tell Todoroki-kun to text me, alright? Whatever. Goodbye. Deku gets halfway through his own goodbye when Katsuki hangs up on him with a satisfying beep. He sets the phone down on the little table next to the bed, chewing his bottom lip. It's a little boring being alone in the room, and it also makes fending off the dark thoughts even harder. He wonders what his parents would be doing if they were here. His father, much like Deku, would probably be crying. His glasses would be pushed to the top of his head to avoid fingerprints as he cradled his own face. The moment Katsuki expressed any sort of emotion, he'd be crying anew, the type that would share his shoulders and leave his eyes red and puffy. His mother, though, it's difficult to say. Depending on her mood, the current amount of tension in their relationship, and if she's stressed from work, all factor into how she reacts emotionally. In his head, she's quietly upset. Her arms and legs would both be crossed tightly, and her mouth firmly pursed. When the doctor came in with the diagnosis, her facade would crack slightly and she would grip the armrests until her knuckles turned white. When he left, her eyes would be glassy, but she would blink a couple of times and be back to quiet. He wishes he could know for sure. The rabbit hole of his mind is thankfully shut down as Aizawa slips through the curtain. "Did you sleep well?" he asks, and Katsuki notices that he looks a little better rested himself. Well, as untired as someone like Aizawa is capable of looking. "It's fine. Nothing to write home about," Katsuki replies, watching the older man sit down and shooing off the last remnants of his sad train of thought. Aizawa shuffles around to get comfortable, then sighs. "Some updates. You're being released in the next hour or so, but we'll have to stop by a pharmacy to pick up your new medication. After, we'll head back to the dorms." He pulls out his notepad, flipping through a few pages before reading aloud. "You're probably going to be tired, but your doctor wants to keep an eye out for any more bleeding or any stomach problems as a result of the medications." Katsuki nods, chewing the inside of his lip. "He too afraid to tell me this shit himself?" An unimpressed glare is sent his way. He was called back to the oncologist's office for another patient. Unfortunately, the world doesn't revolve around you. The reprimand makes Katsuki's shoulders droop a little, but he knows that it's true. "Whatever," he mutters. They stay quiet until Shudo gently slips back through the curtains with a smile. "Katsuki, I have a surprise for you." His voice doesn't portray nearly as much excitement as his gaze, but Katsuki decides to entertain him. "Oh yeah?" he asks, leaning back into the pillows. Shudo nods, coming closer to the bed but with his hands hidden behind his back. "Close your eyes." Katsuki obliges, putting out his hands to catch whatever Shudo has. The object ends up being much lighter than he expected, and he opens his eyes with confusion. In his hands, a little bag sits, adorned with yellow, blue, and red. "Might puffs," Shudo supplies, noting Katsuki's look. "Midoriya said you used to buy them at convenience stores after you saved up your allowance. I saw them in the vending machine and I thought you could use a treat to cheer you up." It's so innocent that Katsuki nearly wants to throw up. Turning the bag around, a small cartoon All Might grins up at him. Next to him, a speech bubble reads, "Mighty Puffs, the #1 hero's favorite snack." Against his will, Katsuki smiles. "So stupid. I should have saved my stupid money and bought more figurines. I always hated when Deku would buy limited edition shit I couldn't afford. I wish we were friends as kids," Shudo says softly, looking down at the bag with a wistful look. "Midoriya and you always have such fun stories about growing up in the area." Katsuki's jaw inadvertently clenches. For Deku to talk about their childhood in such a good light means that Shudo is likely still in the dark about Katsuki's later behavior. "I'm glad we're friends now, though." He gives a smile, gently reaching out to pat Katsuki's foot again. The prior self-control Katsuki has long since been melted away, and this time, he does kick the arms away with a satisfied grin. It takes another hour for them to finally release Katsuki, due to paperwork and getting Yamada to drive over and pick them all up. Once again he has to wheel out, an event that Shudo takes much delight in. Aizawa sits in the front, giving directions, while the two students sit in relative silence. Something about being in a car amplifies Katsuki's drowsiness, and he finds himself drifting off against the cool window. He only stirs awake once they pull up to the dorms. He rubs his eyes furiously, then joins Shudo and Aizawa in climbing out of the car. Their teacher splits off from the two towards the teacher's dorm, throwing Katsuki a white paper pharmacy bag. I'll come to check on you after dinner. If you experience anything before then, let me know. His absence leaves Katsuki and Shudo walking in the cold, where a light dusting of snow has collected overnight. Christmas is soon, Shudo says softly. Are you staying in the dorms? Yeah. My parents were raised Shinto, and I'm already coddled there every weekend. Fuyumi invited me home, but I think I will stay here. There are apparently plans for a secret Santa party. The snow crunches under their feet as they head toward their building. Of course, these sappy extras would want a party like that. You seem like the type to be secretly good at giving presents. You and Midoriya, you're both observant. He's just louder about it. Katsuki snorts, shooting a look at Shudo. Oi, this just sounds like you asking for a present. Maybe so, Shudo says with a nonchalant shrug of his shoulders. They finish the walk in silence. Right as they are about to head into the building, Katsuki finds himself freezing in place. As soon as they walk into the common area, all the excuses Katsuki used before are basically out the window, and he's not sure if he's entirely ready to have 20 pairs of eyes looking at him with pity. Shudo looks back with a confused expression, hand inches from the doorknob. Everything is going to change, Katsuki whispers. Shudo's look turns strangely. Constipated looking. Everything will be fine. He finally says, though he doesn't look very confident. You're shit at comforting people. Am I supposed to be learning from you? If so, I'm a stellar student. Katsuki grimaces. Yeah, that's fair. Just help me get to my room without too many questions. Shudo gives a short nod and opens the door. At first, there's loud talking coming from the common area, which means that the extras haven't left their group meeting yet. Anxiety swirls in Katsuki's gut at the idea of passing by them to the stairs. Sure, he thrives on attention, but the kind where people are either looking at him with praise or aversion. Not the kind where everyone in a room is noticing how weak he is. He takes his sweet time taking off his shoes, ignoring the strange look he receives from Shudo. Eventually, Katsuki can no longer stall and they step into the view of the common area. For a moment, it seems like no one has noticed them until there's an all-too-loud shout. Bakugou! Mina cries, on her feet in a flash and runs over to pull him into a hug. We were so worried. I thought you died. There were a bunch of people in cleaning suits in your room this morning. Katsuki leans into the hold a little, her hair tickling his chin. Oira-kunais. Chill out, I'm obviously not dead. She pulls back, hands moving to somewhat forcefully grab his face. Her expression turns from relief to anger. You're really an asshole. I was worried and no one was telling us what was going on. My phone was dashed. I'm not done speaking. She interrupts, brow furrowing. You mean a lot to everyone here. This aloof, walled-up act is getting seriously annoying. Katsuki jerks his head from her hold, his own anger starting to bubble up. He's getting real tired of everyone pushing him around, especially paired with general exhaustion from the night before. Can you give it a rest? I'm fucking exhausted from, being in the hospital. There's obviously something going on, and you're not leaving until you tell us. She states with finality, gaze firm. Excuse me, Shudo cuts in, stepping between Mina and him. I believe our classmate would much prefer we allow him time to rest and regain his strength. We are also not privy to everything about his life, no matter how much strife it may cause us. Mina looks conflicted, mouth opening and closing a few times before speaking again. But we are just trying to, she trails off, lips pressing into a thin line. The tension makes the hairs on Katsuki's arms stand on end. Shudo sighs. Until Katsuki decides to tell us on his own ambition, I suggest that we leave well enough alone. Show him support, as opposed to hostility. The room becomes suddenly silent as their peers stare at Shudo. Katsuki frowns and sidesteps the boy in front of him. I'll tell you tomorrow. He mutters, just loud enough that the others will overhear as well. The only person I want coming to bother me for the rest of the day is shitty hair. Otherwise, fuck off. With that, Katsuki brushes past a still stunned Mina, past a nervous Kaminari, past a teary-eyed Deku, past all his worried peers to the stairs. His room smells sickeningly clean, but it's much better than the smells of the night before. With a groan, he changes out of his old clothes into a new set of comfortable sleeping clothes, then goes about changing the bedsheets. By the time he finishes, his body aches with exhaustion, and he flops into the fresh bedding. On the shelf above his bed, his phone vibrates. Katsuki curses, having forgotten about the missing device. He stretches dramatically until his fingers just reach the edge, then pulls it towards him. The second he clicks on the power button, a barrage of text, call, and voicemail notifications assaults him. With a frown, he clicks through them somewhat meticulously, disregarding most of the group chat notifs and focusing only on the individual texts he received. Most of them are unsurprising, like Deku or members of the Bakugou squad, but there are a couple of shocking ones. For one, Birdbrain texted him. It's short, a simple, "Is it the anemia?" and then nothing more. Iida also sent a quick "Please reach out when possible," with a similar text from Ponytail. The most shocking though is Jairu. Katsuki wouldn't exactly call them good friends, or even friends at all, so her message makes his brows furrow. Ears, 10:37 a.m. Hey Bakugou-kun, it's Jairu Kyoka. I'm not sure if you even have my number saved, but I thought I'd reach out anyway. Last night, I overheard a lot of what was going on. In fact, I've been hearing a lot of stuff. I promise I'm not trying to eavesdrop, but what I've heard is some pretty serious stuff. Ears, 10:39 a.m. I guess I just wanted to tell you that I know what you're going through. Last year, my grandfather passed away from colon cancer. He lived with us, so I got a lot of first-hand experience dealing with this kind of stuff. It really sucks, but you're not alone. I'm sorry for not telling you what I knew earlier, but know that if you ever need someone to vent to, I'm a really good listener. Ha. Ears, 10:40 a.m. Oh, and I'm not gonna tell anyone either. Well, about the cancer. I told everyone about Aizawa, Kirishima, Todoroki, and you going to the ER because Iida was about to call the police for a missing person report. Don't worry though, I kept it vague. See you in class. The messages invoke both a feeling of relief in Katsuki. She's always been a sort of friend of a friend to him. They've hung out in social groups because Kaminari drags her out, but otherwise, the only time they've ever interacted solo was during the cultural festival. She doesn't seem to pity him, which is a nice feeling. Reminds him of Aizawa, in a way. Sympathetic, but overly so. Just as he goes to respond, a new message comes in. Shitty hair, 5:13 p.m. Hey bro. Shitty hair, 5:13 p.m. Back at the dorms. Shitty hair, 5:14 p.m. Can we talk?